Gustave Courbet was central to the emergence of realism in the mid-19th century. Rejecting the classical and theatrical styles of the French Academy, his art insisted on the physical reality of the objects he observed, even if that reality was plain and blemished. A committed Republican, he also saw his realism as a means to champion the peasants and country folk from his hometown. He has long been famous for his response to the political upheavals which gripped France in his lifetime, and he would die in exile in Switzerland when he was found responsible for the cost of rebuilding of Paris's Vendôme column. More recently, however, historians have also seen his work as an important prelude to other artists of early modernism such as Edouard Manet and Claude Monet. Born in the summer of 1819 in the small rural town of Ornans, near the French Alps, Courbet grew up in a picturesque environment with a supportive family. He enjoyed vigorous physical activities, like swimming with his sisters in the Louis River and playing in the family's pastures and vineyards. At school, Courbet relished being the center of attention and entertaining his classmates with his wit and charm. Though Courbet's general education was solid, his formal art training was mediocre. At 14, he took lessons from a minor neoclassical painter, which likely gave him a foundation to react against. Through the prodding of his father, he studied pre-law at a local college. But he was miserable until a drawing professor at the college invited him to take painting lessons in a home studio. This gave him further confidence in his artistic potential and convinced him to pursue his passion. At 21, Courbet moved to Paris. He avoided study in the studios of any of the period's many academic celebrities, nor did he enroll in the top-tier academic system for the arts in Paris, the École des Beaux-Arts. Instead, he took a few lessons from lesser-known teachers, but mostly taught himself by copying paintings by Caravaggio, Rubens, and others in the Louvre. On a visit to Holland, he was also able to copy the paintings of Rembrandt and Velázquez, while Academy students waited up to a year to pick up a brush, as drawing classes came first. Courbet made his own rigorous schedule and jumped headlong into painting. He often replicated a classical painting again and again to uncover its secrets. He rounded out his independent study by painting from nature and paid models. When visiting home at Ornans, he painted friends and family. Courbet also threw himself into his personal vision of realism, which rejected any classical treatment or rhetoric. Although this was quite radical at the time, he still focused on being selected for the official French salons. But during his first 7 years in Paris, only 3 of his 25 submissions were accepted. Gustave Courbet's self-portrait with a black dog, also known as Portrait of the Artist or Courbet with a Black Dog, represents one of the earliest milestones in the career of the French realist painter, anticipating both the ambitions and provocations that would later define his artistic legacy. Completed initially in 1842 and retouched in 1844, the painting stands today in the Petit Palais, Paris, as a document of Courbet's youthful determination to assert his place in the French art world. It is significant not only as his first successful submission to the Paris Salon, but also as a revealing exploration of identity, representation, and the tension between tradition and innovation. The painting was first exhibited at the Paris Salon of 1844 under the title Portrait of the Author. Of the 3 canvases Courbet submitted that year, only this one was accepted, marking his entry into the official art establishment. This early success, modest though it might seem, was crucial. It signaled that the young artist from Ornans had the capacity to compete on Paris's most prestigious artistic stage. The Salon, still dominated by academic tastes and rigid hierarchies, provided both opportunity and constraint. For Courbet, who would later challenge and even repudiate the Salon system, Self-Portrait with a Black Dog illustrates the moment at which he strategically negotiated these constraints to secure recognition. On the surface, the painting presents a romanticized image of the artist. Courbet depicts himself reclining outdoors, dressed in a cloak and hat, accompanied by a black dog. The informality of the pose relaxed, contemplative, almost aloof contrasts with the more rigid conventions of official portraiture. The black dog at his side functions as both a companion and a symbolic accessory, connoting loyalty and intimacy, but also situating Courbet in a natural, unpretentious setting. This emphasis on the artist's individuality, rooted in both personal life and natural environment, anticipates Courbet's later insistence on painting real subjects rather than idealized or mythological figures. Technical analysis of the canvas reveals that it was a reused support, with traces of a coat hanger at its contours, suggesting that it may originally have been presented in a slightly rounded form. This physical evidence deepens the interpretive dimension of the work. Courbet's resourcefulness, reworking of materials, and attention to presentation underscore his awareness of both practical constraints and the demands of salon exhibition. The unusual perspective, painted de sotto in su, from below upward, further enhances the dramatic presence of the artist, positioning the viewer as if gazing upward at him. This compositional choice contributes to an aura of authority and self-assertion, even at this early stage of his career. Critically, the painting reflects the broader cultural tensions of the 1840s. Courbet was working within a romantic idiom, echoing the self-expressive portraits of artists such as Eugène Delacroix or Théodore Géricault. Yet he simultaneously infused the work with an emerging realist sensibility. The natural setting, the dog, and the unidealized presentation of himself all point toward Courbet's rejection of academic allegory and toward his pursuit of sincerity in art. In this sense, Self-Portrait with a Black Dog can be understood as a liminal work. It bridges the gap between romantic self-fashioning and the radical realism that Courbet would later champion in works such as The Stonebreakers, 1849, and A Burial at Ornans, 1849-50. The painting's reception at the Salon is also telling. While it was accepted, it did not create a sensation, and contemporary critics paid limited attention to it. Nevertheless, its presence at the Louvre Palace in 1844 allowed Courbet to insert himself into the artistic mainstream while quietly signaling his divergence from it. The fact that he titled it Portrait of the Author reveals his acute awareness of self-presentation. He framed himself not just as a painter, but as a creator, an intellectual agent in his own right. In retrospect, Self-Portrait with a Black Dog emerges as an early manifesto of Courbet's lifelong pursuit of artistic independence. Though lacking the overt radicalism of his later realist masterpieces, it is marked by subtle defiance, an informality of pose, a blending of personal life and artistic persona, and a technical ingenuity that resists convention. It is, in effect, the portrait of a young artist at the threshold of rebellion, still negotiating with the establishment, yet already laying the groundwork for the seismic shifts he would introduce to 19th century painting. Gustave Courbet's Le Désespéré, The Desperate Man, is among the most arresting self-portraits of the 19th century, painted between 1843 and 1845 during his formative years in Paris. The work presents the young artist in an unflinching confrontation with himself and with the viewer, embodying both the turbulence of youthful ambition and the existential anxieties of the romantic spirit. Today held in a private collection but once exhibited at the Musée d'Orsay in 2007, the painting has become emblematic of Courbet's self-fashioning as a radical, uncompromising figure within the artistic culture of his time. The portrait depicts Courbet at close range, his hands clutching his hair in a gesture of frantic despair. His wide, penetrating eyes engage the spectator directly, collapsing the distance between painted subject and viewer. The tension of the composition is heightened by stark contrasts. The pallor of his face set against the darkness of his hair and beard. The open collar of his white shirt illuminated by a shaft of light, and the loosely draped dark scarf that lends both informality and drama to the image. Light from above intensifies the theatricality of the scene, casting dramatic shadows and accentuating the artist's expressive features. The psychological intensity of Le Désespéré places it firmly within the Romantic tradition, echoing the heightened emotional registers found in literature and painting of the early 19th century. Yet the portrait also foreshadows Courbet's later embrace of realism, in depicting himself not as an idealized or heroic figure, but as a man overwhelmed by his own emotional state. Courbet asserts the raw authenticity of individual experience. The work may be read as both a personal confession and a statement of artistic intent, presenting the artist as one who dares to confront not only the world, but also himself without mediation. Viewed in retrospect, Le Désespéré acquires an almost prophetic quality. The desperation etched into Courbet's youthful features seems to anticipate the struggles he would face as the leader of the realist movement, challenging academic conventions and provoking political controversy. At the same time, the work reveals the inseparability of Courbet's art from his persona. To paint himself in such a state was to lay bare the very conditions of artistic creation as an act of passion, defiance, and existential urgency. In this way, Le Désespéré stands as both an intimate psychological document and a manifesto in paint. It exemplifies Courbet's lifelong commitment to truth, not as an abstract ideal, but as a visceral, lived reality, whether desperate, ecstatic, or mundane. Courbet's The Happy Lovers, 1844, now housed in the Musée des Beaux-Arts de Lyon, occupies a central position in the painter's early career, bridging the space between romantic sentiment and the nascent principles of realism. Exhibited in 1855 at the Pavillon Courbet in Paris under the alternative title The Waltz, the work was recognized by contemporaries for its emotional immediacy and intimate characterization. The fact that the composition was sufficiently important to Courbet that he produced a second version, The Lovers in the Countryside. Sentiments of youth, now in the Petit Palais, testifies to the enduring personal and artistic significance of the subject. The lion canvas depicts a man and a woman, understood to be Courbet himself and possibly Virginie Binet, the mother of his son, leaning into one another in a gesture suggestive of both embrace and dance. Their figures, rendered in profile, create a dynamic tension between intimacy and public performance. The imagery of lovers caught in the momentum of a waltz evokes romantic ideals of passion and youthful vitality, while at the same time rooting the scene in the specificity of Courbet's own life. The inclusion of Virginie Binet as a likely model reinforces this autobiographical resonance, situating the work within a nexus of personal sentiment and artistic experimentation. Technical examination has revealed important insights into the painting's development. Radiographic analysis shows that the lion version predates the Petit Palais version, and that Courbet reworked the composition extensively. The original format was square, with later additions expanding the lower portion of the canvas. Pentimenti disclose alterations in gesture and setting, including the woman's hand originally resting on the man's shoulder and a background that was once a bay rather than a landscape. These revisions suggest Courbet's careful negotiation between spontaneity and pictorial balance, underscoring the degree to which the work is not simply a snapshot of emotion, but a deliberately crafted meditation on intimacy. The Paris version, by contrast, displays no pentimenti, suggesting a more deliberate replication of the theme rather than an evolving experiment. Its smaller scale and compositional clarity indicate Courbet's effort to refine a subject that had proven compelling, perhaps as a statement of artistic maturation or as a gift within his personal circle. Together, the two versions embody Courbet's capacity to translate lived experience into universal allegory. The lovers are at once Courbet and Binet, and archetypes of youthful passion. The Happy Lovers thus operates on multiple registers. It is at once an autobiographical image of Courbet's own romantic life, a romantic evocation of passion rendered in painterly form, and a precursor to the uncompromising naturalism that would characterize his realist works. The fusion of sentiment, gesture, and self-representation anticipates Courbet's later ability to anchor broad human themes in the specificity of the observed world. In this sense, the painting stands as a declaration of artistic identity, presenting Courbet not only as a lover, but as a painter of love and interpreter of private experience transformed into public art. The Cellist, self-portrait, 1847, housed today in the Nationalmuseum in Stockholm, occupies a crucial position in the artist's formative years, when he was still negotiating between academic convention and the aesthetic impulses that would later define his realism. Painted in oil on canvas, the work measures 117 by 90 centimeters and represents Courbet not as a painter but as a musician, absorbed in the act of performance. This displacement of artistic identity, casting himself as a cellist rather than as a painter, constitutes a complex meditation on selfhood, art and cultural aspiration in mid-19th century France. The composition presents Courbet with cello in hand, his body slightly inclined toward the instrument, his gaze focused in a manner that blends introspection with dramatic intensity. The image does not merely capture the likeness of the artist, but stages a theatrical performance of identity. Courbet as interpreter, Courbet as romantic figure, Courbet as cultural participant beyond the boundaries of painting. In the context of the 1840s, when romantic notions of the artist as a visionary genius still held sway, this self-portrait constructs Courbet's persona through the metaphor of music, a language of emotional depth and transcendent communication. Yet the work is not entirely subsumed by romantic rhetoric. The robust naturalism of Courbet's physiognomy, the weight of his form, and the earthy presence of the cello all anchor the painting in the tangible world. The oscillation between romantic expressiveness and realist solidity anticipates the dual impulses that would define Courbet's mature oeuvre. If the cellist does not yet proclaim the defiant realism of the Stonebreakers, it nevertheless reveals the artist's search for an authentic mode of representation that resists the idealization typical of his academic contemporaries. The choice of subject may also reflect Courbet's ambition to position himself within a broader cultural sphere. By representing himself with a cello, he aligns painting with music, situating his artistic identity within a polyphonic register of the arts. At the same time, the work can be understood as a strategic performance of bourgeois respectability and refinement, qualities increasingly expected of artists seeking recognition within the salon system. The painting thus becomes both a personal self-exploration and a public declaration of cultural legitimacy. The Cellist self-portrait exemplifies Courbet's early experimentation with self-representation as a vehicle for negotiating artistic identity. It embodies the tension between romantic individualism and realist materiality, between personal introspection and public performance. In positioning himself not only as a painter but as a cultural figure of wider resonance, Courbet laid the groundwork for his later radical self-assertion as the leader of realism. The work stands, therefore, as both an artistic experiment and a manifesto in disguise, announcing the arrival of an artist who would redefine the visual language of the 19th century. Courbet's Man with a Pipe, now held in the Musée Fabre in Montpellier, represents a pivotal moment in the artist's early career and marks a decisive step toward his mature realism. Executed at the end of the 1840s, this self-portrait was described by Courbet himself as the portrait of a fanatic, an ascetic, a man who, disillusioned by the nonsense that made up his education, seeks to live by his own principles. Such a statement reveals not only the painting's autobiographical dimension, but also its role as an aesthetic manifesto, signaling Courbet's determination to break free from academic tradition and construct an independent artistic identity. Unlike the more theatrical self-portraits of the 1840s, Man with a Pipe is stripped of narrative embellishment and presents the artist in a stark, direct manner. Courbet's face, framed by unruly hair and beard, confronts the viewer with a forceful immediacy. His rustic clothing and workman's pipe reinforce a bohemian persona, while the head's frontal projection into the viewer's space asserts both confidence and defiance. The absence of decorative or symbolic attributes allows the image to function as a radical assertion of selfhood. Courbet as an ordinary man, yet also Courbet as a painter who elevates the ordinary to the realm of high art. One that Courbet released from his studio. Until then, his self-representations had remained personal experiments in identity and style. The decision to part with Man with a Pipe and its subsequent exhibition at the Salon of 1851 demonstrate Courbet's readiness to engage publicly with his new artistic philosophy. The painting was well received, and its acquisition in 1854 by Alfred Bruyas, a prominent collector and close friend of the artist, confirmed its status as a cornerstone of Courbet's early career. Bruyas, whose patronage would become essential to Courbet's success, recognized in this canvas the maturity of an artist who had defined his own principles and was prepared to challenge prevailing conventions. The portrait's significance lies not only in its autobiographical force but also in its broader cultural resonance. By fashioning himself as a bohemian outsider, Courbet aligned his image with the avant-garde stance of independence and nonconformity, a position that would later underpin the ideology of realism. At the same time, the painting anticipates the artist's lifelong concern with the dignity of ordinary people and everyday life, themes that would come to dominate his most celebrated works of the 1850s. Man with a Pipe can be seen as the first mature declaration of Courbet's realism, articulating a rejection of academic artifice in favor of authenticity, individuality, and truth. It is both a self-portrait and a manifesto encapsulating the artist's self-perception as a man who seeks to live and to paint by his own principles. Through its raw immediacy and uncompromising presence, the painting embodies the very qualities that would make Courbet one of the most transformative figures of 19th century art. Painted in 1844, the Hammock, Le Rêve, Die Hängematte, marks an important moment in the early career of Gustave Courbet, when the artist was beginning to define himself against the conventions of the French salon. Executed in oil, the canvas depicts a partially nude young woman asleep on a hammock, placed within a shaded woodland glade where a brook meanders nearby. The intimate setting, at once secluded and sensuous, situates the reclining figure within a pastoral idyll that recalls earlier traditions of Arcadian repose, yet with a distinctly modern frankness in its treatment of the female body. The work is not merely an exercise in naturalism, but also a cultural dialogue with contemporary literature. Courbet alludes directly to Victor Hugo's 1829 poem, Sarah la baigneuse, Sarah the Bather, a text that intertwines sensual imagery with romantic reverie. By embedding this literary reference, Courbet situates his painting within a broader romantic discourse that embraced the dreamlike and the erotic as expressions of inner subjectivity. The alternate title of the work, Le Rêve, The Dream, reinforces the notion of an imaginative suspension between reality and fantasy, amplifying the sense that the viewer is witness not simply to a nude, but to a private, poetic vision. Yet Courbet's painting was met with resistance. Submitted to the Salon of 1845 at the Louvre, it was rejected by the authorities, a decision that underscores both the restrictive academic standards of the time and Courbet's growing reputation as an outsider to institutional taste. Unlike mythological or allegorical nudes sanctioned by salon conventions, the hammock dispenses with the protective framework of classical subject matter. Instead, it presents the female body in a modern, natural setting, a gesture that threatened to collapse the boundary between high art and sensual immediacy. The painting's current location in the Reinhardt collection at Römerholz, Winterthur, Switzerland, further attests to its contested trajectory. Denied a place in the mid-19th century French art establishment, the work nevertheless found its preservation in a private collection, ensuring its survival as a record of Courbet's youthful boldness. Seen retrospectively, the hammock reveals the seeds of Courbet's later realism. Its unapologetic treatment of the human figure, its defiance of academic propriety, and its grounding in contemporary cultural reference all anticipate the strategies he would employ in the 1850s and 1860s to challenge the hierarchies of subject matter in French painting. If the hammock was too daring for the 1845 Salon, it was precisely this daring its conflation of poetic sensuality with uncompromising naturalism that signaled Courbet's future role as one of the most disruptive and innovative painters of 19th century Europe. Painted between 1844 and 1847, Gustave Courbet's The Bacchante stands among the artist's earliest surviving works, a formative exercise in both technical mastery and mythological reinterpretation. The title directly evokes the Bacchantes of Greco-Roman mythology, the ecstatic female followers of Bacchus as well as the long lineage of Renaissance paintings and sculptures that had celebrated these subjects. By situating his work within this classical framework, Courbet aligned himself with an esteemed pictorial tradition while simultaneously testing the boundaries of his own emerging style. At this stage in his career, Courbet was still deeply influenced by the old masters. The sensuality and composition of the Bacchante recall the work of Correggio, particularly his Venus, Satyr, and Cupid, in which the nude female figure is rendered with both idealized grace and corporeal presence. Courbet's dialogue with these predecessors suggests his conscious effort to situate himself within the Western canon, drawing from established models while experimenting with a more tangible realism. Another painting from the same period, Female Nude Sleeping by a Stream, Detroit Institute of Arts, underscores his fascination with the nude as both an aesthetic and a cultural problem, a subject caught between ideal beauty and naturalistic representation. The provenance of the painting further reflects its complex historical trajectory. Sold in 1914 by the Amsterdam dealers Frederick Muller and Sier, the canvas passed through the Van Nierop collection and later the Lefebvre Gallery in London before being acquired by Dr. Gustav Rau for his foundation in Cologne. Its 20th century circulation through major European collections highlights its enduring resonance as a work that bridges the gap between Courbet's academic beginnings and his later revolutionary realism. In 2011, the Musée Courbet emphasized the significance of the Bacchante in an exhibition exploring the relationship between Courbet and his contemporary, the sculptor Augustin Clesinger. Clesinger's celebrated Woman Bitten by a Serpent, 1847, was shown alongside Courbet's painting to reveal their shared exploration of sensuality, mythology, and the expressive potential of the female nude. The juxtaposition underscored how both artists, though working in different media, sought to revitalize classical themes with a more palpable immediacy and emotional charge. Viewed in retrospect, the Bacchante is not merely an academic nude, but an early declaration of Courbet's artistic ambitions. While indebted to tradition, it already contains the seeds of his later defiance. His insistence on presenting the human body not as an abstract ideal, but as a living, breathing presence. This synthesis of mythological subject matter with a budding realism foreshadows the painter's eventual break from academic conventions and his pursuit of an art rooted in lived experience. Courbet painted consistently in a realist mode during his time in Paris. For example, he was quick to decline a request to paint angels for a church, remarking, "Show me an angel, and I will paint one." Instead, he painted regular folk in all their glorious ordinariness, and it was not a surprise when, in 1848, Courbet's growing group of influential friends appointed him leader of the realist movement in Paris. The poet Charles Baudelaire and the outspoken anarchist Pierre Proudhon were both part of this group of intellectuals that pushed each other to challenge the norms of the day. Also in 1848, under a newly formed republic, the Paris Salon became jury-free for 1 year. This allowed Courbet's submission of 10 paintings to win automatic acceptance, where they made a great impression and helped the painter win a gold medal the following year. Under Academy rules, the gold medal gave Courbet immunity against future selection committees, a bypass that he enjoyed until 1857, when this rule was changed. Without this protection, burial at Ornans, 1849, amongst other important paintings, probably would have been rejected. This huge confrontational painting was Courbet's most audacious display of rural realism. The grand scale at which he depicted the ordinary people attracted a firestorm of rebuke, with many conservative critics uncomfortable with the picture's implicit support for democratic politics. Painted during the winter of 1848 to 1849, Gustave Courbet's After Dinner at Ornans, L'après-dîner à Ornans, represents a pivotal moment in the history of 19th century French painting. Executed on a monumental scale, 195 by 257 cm, the work marks the artist's first ambitious engagement with his native Ornans as subject matter, initiating a series of grand canvases that would culminate in the Stone Breakers, 1849, and a burial at Ornans, 1849–1850. Far from being a simple genre scene, After Dinner at Ornans established Courbet's realism as both an aesthetic and ideological program. The assertion that the life of ordinary people deserved representation on the same scale and with the same seriousness as historical or mythological narratives. The painting depicts a group of men gathered in a modest interior, absorbed in the leisurely ritual of music and conviviality after a shared meal. One plays a violin while others listen intently, smoking and drinking. Courbet's treatment of the scene emphasizes the naturalism of posture, gesture, and atmosphere. The figures, rendered life-size, are neither idealized nor caricatured, but presented with the sobriety of lived experience. The palpable density of the space, the muted light, the rustic furnishings, the physical presence of the sitters creates a mood of intimate authenticity. Art historians have long remarked upon Courbet's debt to earlier French masters of genre painting, most notably the Le Nain brothers and Jean-Baptiste Simeon Chardin. From Le Nain, Courbet inherited the solemn gravity with which everyday gatherings could be depicted. From Chardin, the sensitivity to the quiet poetry of domestic life. Yet Courbet transformed these precedents by radically enlarging the scale, transferring what had traditionally been considered minor subjects onto a vast canvas associated with history painting. In this act, he effectively elevated the status of rural provincial life, asserting its worth as a subject of modern art. The reception of the work at the 1849 Salon confirmed its significance. Awarded a medal and purchased by the French state, After Dinner at Ornans marked Courbet's public breakthrough. Its success stemmed in part from the resonance of its subject matter at a moment of profound social and political upheaval. The revolution of 1848 had freshly underscored questions of class, labor, and national identity. Courbet's dignified portrayal of provincial villagers could thus be read as a democratic gesture, aligning the artist with contemporary calls for recognition of ordinary citizens within the cultural as well as political sphere. The influence of After Dinner at Ornans extended well beyond Courbet's own career. Among those profoundly affected was the young Pierre-Auguste Renoir, who in 1866 painted Mother Anthony's Tavern, a composition that pays explicit homage to Courbet's canvas. Renoir's work demonstrates how Courbet's vision of a convivial provincial gathering could be reinterpreted within the emerging framework of Impressionism, where the depiction of everyday leisure remained central. Seen today, After Dinner at Ornans embodies the essence of Courbet's realism, an insistence on truth to nature, a refusal to privilege the heroic over the quotidian, and a conviction that art must speak to the realities of contemporary life. By monumentalizing the simple act of music-making after a village meal, Courbet inaugurated a new pictorial order in which the ordinary became the ground of artistic modernity. The Stone Breakers, Les Casseurs de Pierre, painted in 1849 by Gustave Courbet, is one of the most iconic, yet tragically lost masterpieces of 19th century realism. Executed in oil on canvas, the work depicted two laborers breaking stones along a roadside, an old man and a boy, emphasizing the harshness and monotony of physical toil. By choosing such an unidealized subject, Courbet openly rejected the conventions of academic painting and affirmed his dedication to portraying the real conditions of ordinary people. The painting was first exhibited at the Paris Salon of 1850-1851, where it shocked many viewers. At the time, high art was expected to depict grand historical, mythological, or religious themes. Instead, Courbet presented a monumental canvas devoted to anonymous peasants engaged in back-breaking manual labor. The figures are shown without heroism, their faces obscured, emphasizing their universality and the dehumanizing cycle of poverty. The younger worker symbolizes the beginning of a lifetime of hardship, while the elder, stooped with age, represents the inevitable outcome of such labor. Courbet's technique also contributed to the controversy. He employed a heavy impasto, applying thick layers of paint that gave the work a tactile, almost sculptural quality. Critics at the Salon dismissed the piece as crude and poorly lit, but others, such as the philosopher and social theorist Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, recognized its radical message. Proudhon praised the painting as a masterpiece in its genre, interpreting it as a powerful socialist statement about class, labor, and the dignity of the working poor. Over time, the Stonebreakers came to be celebrated as one of Courbet's defining works and a cornerstone of the realist movement. By 1915, it was already considered an important work of modern painting, representing a decisive break from Romanticism and paving the way for later artists who sought truth over idealization. Courbet painted at least two versions of the Stonebreakers. The first, exhibited at the Paris Salon, was acquired by the Gemäldegalerie Alte Meister in Dresden, where it was hailed as Courbet's monumental masterpiece. During World War II, the work was believed to have been destroyed in 1945 during the Allied bombing of Dresden, reportedly when a cart carrying it for evacuation caught fire. Yet archival records remain ambiguous. In 1988, Richard Raskin suggested that the museum listed the painting as missing rather than destroyed, implying it may have been transferred elsewhere in 1944. The second version, a reversed composition of the scene, survived and is preserved today in the Oskar Reinhardt collection in Winterthur, Switzerland. Though lost, the Stonebreakers continues to be a touchstone for art historians. It epitomizes Courbet's ambition to paint what he saw and his determination to elevate humble, everyday realities to the scale of history painting. By monumentalizing the anonymous poor, Courbet both confronted his contemporaries with uncomfortable truths and redefined the very purpose of modern art. Peasants from Flagey back from the fair, Les Paysans de Flagey, Revenant de la Foire, is a monumental oil painting completed by Gustave Courbet in 1850, during the formative years of his realist career. Measuring over 6 meters in width, the canvas is housed today in the Musée Courbet in Ornans. The subject is deceptively simple. A group of villagers from Flagey, a hamlet near Ornans, returning home after attending a fair. They are shown in various states of fatigue, some leading cattle and donkeys, others carrying their purchases, while children and women mingle naturally among them. What distinguishes this work is not merely its subject, but its unprecedented scale. By rendering the procession of ordinary peasants on a canvas of dimensions traditionally reserved for biblical or royal scenes, Courbet radically redefined what could be considered worthy of monumental art. His villages, painted with an earthy palette of browns, greens, and ochres, emerge with tangible weight and specificity. Each figure is individualized with weathered faces, coarse garments, and weary gestures. Yet together they form a collective presence, embodying both the burdens and the dignity of rural life. The surrounding landscape, treated with Courbet's characteristic dense brushwork, is inseparable from the people who inhabit it, reinforcing the profound connection between community and land. The choice of subject matter carried a clear social resonance. Mid-19th century France was a nation divided between the rapid modernization of its cities and the persistence of traditional rural life. By giving peasants the grandeur of historical painting, Courbet asserted their cultural and political importance at a time when rural voices were often excluded from the dominant narratives of French society. His work emerged in the aftermath of the Revolution of 1848, when questions of democracy and class representation were pressing. Although the painting does not depict political struggle, its sheer existence as a monumental celebration of rural people amounted to a visual declaration of their place within the national story. Beyond its social implications, the painting also illustrates Courbet's philosophical stance on art. For him, truth resided in direct observation, not in idealized mythologies. By showing the villagers in their plain reality, without embellishment or theatricality, Courbet aligned himself with contemporary positivist thought, which emphasized empirical evidence and material reality. In doing so, he challenged the hierarchy of subjects in art, implicitly asking why kings and saints should be privileged over common people whose lives are equally part of history. The work thus becomes a democratic statement, an affirmation that the grandeur of art can and should be found in the dignity of the everyday. When it was exhibited at the Salon of 1850, 1851, peasants from Flagey, back from the fair, caused a stir. Many critics, accustomed to polished academic painting, were unsettled by its unvarnished realism and the monumental presence of figures they considered too humble for high art. Others recognized in it a powerful innovation, one that gave voice to social realities long ignored on the walls of official exhibitions. Alongside the Stonebreakers and A Burial at Ornans, this painting confirmed Courbet's position as the leading figure of realism and as an artist intent on reshaping the boundaries of representation. Today, the canvas is seen not simply as a genre scene but as a visual manifesto. It compels viewers to acknowledge the silent endurance of rural life, elevating what might otherwise be overlooked into a central subject of art. In the steady procession of villages, Courbet invites us to see the unheroic, the ordinary, and the local as part of the broader fabric of human history, challenging us to rethink what deserves a monumental place on canvas. A Burial at Ornans, Un enterrement à Ornans, painted between 1849 and 1850, stands as one of Gustave Courbet's most ambitious and provocative works. Spanning over 6.5 meters in width, the canvas presents a starkly realistic depiction of a provincial funeral in Courbet's native town of Ornans. The painting's size, typically reserved for grand history paintings, directly confronts the academic tradition by applying monumental scale to an ostensibly ordinary subject. Instead of kings, saints, or mythological heroes, the canvas is populated by anonymous villagers, rendered with unflinching attention to their individuality and physicality. The composition is striking in its sobriety. The figures are arranged horizontally across the canvas, filling the pictorial space without hierarchical distinction. Clergy, mourners, veterans, pallbearers, and dogs alike occupy the same visual field. Each character is portrayed with psychological detachment. Their gestures and expressions range from solemn indifference to distraction, suggesting the banality of ritual rather than the drama of transcendence. Courbet refuses to orchestrate emotion or embellish the scene with allegory. The open grave at the center of the foreground becomes a dark void, anchoring the composition with a raw sense of mortality. Yet it is surrounded by figures who seem more preoccupied with their social roles than with metaphysical reflection. This refusal of idealization embodies Courbet's realist credo, to paint only what he could see. The painting undermines the conventions of religious and historical art by denying narrative climax or spiritual consolation. The funeral becomes not a sacred passage but a communal event, grounded in the physical presence of ordinary people. The surrounding landscape of Ornan's bleak hills beneath a somber sky intensifies the sense of imminence, rooting the event in a specific local reality rather than elevating it to timeless myth. The social and philosophical implications of the work were profound. Exhibited at the Salon of 1850-1851, A Burial at Ornans scandalized critics and viewers alike. Many were disturbed by the audacity of giving provincial peasants the scale of national history, interpreting it as an affront to artistic tradition and bourgeois sensibilities. For Courbet, however, this was precisely the point. The ordinary lives of rural citizens deserved recognition equal to that of historical elites. In this way, the painting functioned as a democratic gesture, aligning with the egalitarian spirit that lingered after the Revolution of 1848. At a deeper level, the painting can also be read as a philosophical meditation on death and human existence. By stripping the funeral of transcendental narrative, Courbet confronts the viewer with the stark materiality of life's end. The grave is simply a hole in the ground. The mourners are distracted, weary, or detached. The clergy appear as functionaries rather than mediators of salvation. In this sense, the painting resonates with a modern, almost existential sensibility, portraying death not as a sacred passage but as an inevitable, mundane fact of life. Critics like Pierre-Joseph Proudhon recognized in the work a radical social message, interpreting it as a visual articulation of democracy and realism in art. Others, however, condemned it as vulgar and nihilistic. Regardless of its reception, A Burial at Ornans marked a turning point in the history of painting. It dismantled the hierarchy of subjects and redefined the possibilities of monumental art. Today, the painting is regarded as a cornerstone of realism, both for its audacious subject matter and for its uncompromising fidelity to material truth. By monumentalizing a simple funeral in a provincial town, Courbet expanded the boundaries of art, compelling viewers to see dignity, meaning, and historical weight in the lives of ordinary people. The painting thus embodies Courbet's belief that realism is not merely an artistic style, but a philosophical stance, one that insists on the centrality of lived experience in the representation of human existence. Ironically, shortly after the debut of Burial at Ornans, the French government reverted to an authoritarian empire under Napoleon III. Courbet remained staunchly opposed to his rule, and in time the emperor would also have cause to express distaste at Courbet's nudes. In 1853, Napoleon III and his wife Eugénie made the most memorable gestures of disapproval. The story goes that while perusing the Paris Salon, Eugénie made a remark of appreciation of Rosa Bonheur's painting, The Horse Fair, which exhibited enormous workhorses from a rear view. Shortly thereafter, standing in front of Courbet's painting of The Bathers, 1853, that features two robust farm women bathing in a stream, she remarked that Courbet's models bore a resemblance to the bulky Bonheur horses. Then, supposedly, the emperor struck the canvas with the nude with his riding crop. 2 years later, when 3 of the most important of the 14 canvases Courbet submitted to the Paris 1855 World Exposition jury were rejected, the artist invented a way of doing business that became just as shocking and innovative as his paintings. He defiantly made his own pavilion outside the grounds under the banner Realism, and displayed 40 paintings from his 15-year working period. Gustave Courbet's Young Ladies of the Village, Les Demoiselles de Village, painted in 1852 and now housed in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, represents one of the artist's most incisive explorations of class relations, gender dynamics, and the role of realism in mid-19th century French painting. Signed G. Courbet at the bottom left, the canvas demonstrates the artist's ambition to confront not only aesthetic conventions but also the social realities of his time. The painting depicts 3 well-dressed young women, traditionally identified as Courbet's sisters, distributing alms to a barefoot peasant girl who stands before them with a small dog. The setting is the rural landscape of Ornans, Courbet's birthplace, rendered with an attention to natural detail and spatial depth that situates the figures firmly within the topography of the Franche-Comté region. The composition is strikingly frontal, with the women aligned across the foreground, their elegant garments contrasting with the modest attire of the child, thereby foregrounding the encounter as an emblem of social disparity. At the level of subject matter, the work challenges the conventions of both genre and history painting. Rather than elevating the act of charity into allegory or religious symbolism, Courbet presents it with disarming plainness. The gestures of the young women are courteous, yet restrained, their body language suggesting both benevolence and distance. The peasant child, meanwhile, appears hesitant, caught between gratitude and unease. The interaction, therefore, is not dramatized as a harmonious exchange, but is instead depicted as an ambiguous social negotiation, charged with latent tensions between classes. The painting provoked immediate controversy at the Salon of 1852. Critics found fault with its composition, the disproportion of its figures, and the bluntness of its realism. Some accused Courbet of failing to idealize his subjects, while others were unsettled by the overt juxtaposition of bourgeois refinement and rural poverty. Unlike earlier depictions of charity, which often romanticized the moral virtue of the wealthy or the humility of the poor, Courbet's canvas refuses such idealization. It lays bare the imbalance of power embedded in the act of giving, transforming what might have been a sentimental scene into a critical commentary on social hierarchy. Philosophically, the painting resonates with Courbet's realist agenda, the insistence that art must reflect the world as it is, rather than as tradition dictates it should appear. In this sense, Young Ladies of the Village embodies a democratic vision of art, one that destabilizes the academic hierarchy of subjects. By portraying his own sisters in a provincial setting, interacting with a local peasant child, Courbet anchors the painting in lived experience while simultaneously interrogating the social relations that structure daily life. At a broader cultural level, the painting also reflects the tensions of post-revolutionary France, a society grappling with industrialization, class conflict, and shifting political orders. The canvas can be read as a microcosm of these larger transformations. The bourgeois figures, representatives of education and relative privilege, encounter the persistent realities of rural poverty. Courbet offers no resolution, no allegorical elevation, but instead forces the viewer to confront the uneasy coexistence of these social worlds. Today, Young Ladies of the Village stands as a seminal example of Courbet's realism, uncompromising in its depiction of the ordinary, provocative in its social implications, and groundbreaking in its refusal to separate aesthetic practice from social critique. Through its ambiguous portrayal of charity, the painting destabilizes conventional notions of generosity and virtue, compelling the viewer to recognize both the material disparities and the human complexities that defined 19th century rural France. In doing so, Courbet once again demonstrates that his realism was not merely a matter of style, but a philosophical stance rooted in truth, critique, and the democratization of art. Painted in 1853, The Wrestlers stands as one of Gustave Courbet's most ambitious large-scale works, now housed in the Museum of Fine Arts, Budapest. The canvas depicts two men locked in a moment of French wrestling, a sport derived from the Greco-Roman tradition, staged in the former Hippodrome on the Champs-Élysées in Paris. With its monumental scale and raw physicality, the painting confronts viewers with the power of the human body, stripped of ornament and narrative, and presented as an unvarnished reality. When Courbet submitted The Wrestlers to the Paris Salon of 1853, it was paired with his controversial The Bathers. Critics at the time barely commented on the wrestling scene, their attention overwhelmingly drawn to the scandal surrounding the bathers. In a letter to his parents, Courbet wryly noted that, "I have covered their nudity, and the critics have not yet said anything good or bad about it." This remark not only underscores the double standards of the Salon public, but also reveals Courbet's keen awareness of the ways in which realism could challenge accepted norms of representation. Thematically, The Wrestlers embodies Courbet's realist philosophy. By elevating a common athletic contest to the level of grand history painting, Courbet subverted the hierarchy of genres. Instead of mythological heroes or allegorical figures, he chose anonymous men whose strength and struggle are entirely human. The emphasis on weight, muscle tension, and corporeal presence reflects his desire to anchor painting in lived, physical experience. Art historians have noted how Courbet's focus on flesh and gravity resists idealization, aligning with his conviction that painting is essentially a concrete art. It can only consist of the representation of real and existing things. The choice of subject also carried broader cultural implications. In mid-19th century France, wrestling was associated with virility, popular entertainment, and the assertion of physical endurance. By monumentalizing such a scene, Courbet not only validated working-class practices but also proposed an alternative vision of heroism, one grounded in labor, struggle, and the body's resilience. Some scholars have even read the painting as a subtle allegory of democratic strength, where ordinary men replace aristocratic or mythic ideals as the true protagonists of modern life. Courbet's bold decision to reuse an earlier canvas for the wrestlers, the remnants of a Faustian subject titled Saint Walpurgis's Knight, further underlines his pragmatic independence as an artist, as well as the economic constraints under which he often worked. Later, the painting entered the collection of Alfred Bruyas's Circle, passed into Hungarian hands through Ferenc Hatvany, and today stands as one of the masterpieces of Courbet's realist corpus. Seen in retrospect, The Wrestlers was more than a depiction of sport. It was a manifesto in paint, asserting the dignity of the physical and the real, while challenging the French Academy's preference for idealized myth. In its muscular confrontation, we find not only two men in struggle, but also the symbolic wrestling of realism itself against the entrenched traditions of 19th century art. Unveiled at the Paris Salon of 1853, the Bathers, Les Baigneuses, today housed in the Musée Fabre in Montpellier, marked one of Gustave Courbet's most notorious interventions in 19th century art. The monumental canvas depicts a robust, unclothed woman stepping into a woodland stream, attended by a younger maid who carries her garments. In its scale, subject, and raw directness, the painting openly challenged the conventions of academic art, sparking one of Courbet's greatest scandals. Traditionally, bathing scenes had been the domain of mythological allegory. Painters from Titian to Ingres had cloaked the female nude in the aura of Venus or Diana, ennobling the subject by attaching it to classical ideals. Courbet, however, refused such disguises. His bather is not a goddess, but an ordinary woman, rendered with a striking solidity and physicality. Her flesh is heavy, her posture awkward, her body firmly situated in a real landscape rather than a mythic realm. By granting such a figure the scale of history painting, Courbet broke with centuries of aesthetic hierarchy, asserting that the lives and bodies of ordinary people were worthy of monumental art. The critical reaction was explosive. For many salon viewers, Courbet's refusal to idealize the nude was an affront to decorum and taste. The bathers was derided as vulgar, even grotesque. One critic complained of the immense peasant woman with dirty feet, revealing how the painting unsettled bourgeois sensibilities by collapsing the divide between the body of the laboring classes and the high art tradition of the nude. At the same time, however, the controversy amplified Courbet's reputation as the audacious leader of the realist movement, a painter who rejected myth, allegory, and romantic illusion in favor of the tangible and the everyday. Beyond its provocation, the painting also carried broader philosophical implications. By presenting the female body without the veil of mythology, Courbet questioned the structures of desire and representation in 19th century society. Instead of an eroticized, unattainable Venus, we encounter a body that is grounded, mortal, and unidealized. The landscape, painted with earthy tones and thick brushwork, echoes this commitment to reality rather than fantasy. Scholars have often interpreted this work as a declaration of Courbet's materialist worldview. Art, like life, must begin with the real, the physical, and the unadorned. The Bathers also reflects Courbet's alignment of art with democratic values. Just as he monumentalized working men in the Stonebreakers or the Wrestlers, here he elevates an anonymous woman to the status of grand subject. In doing so, he undermines the elitist assumption that only mythic heroes or aristocratic patrons deserve the dignity of monumental painting. The radical equality of Courbet's vision, scandalous to his contemporaries, foreshadowed the social and artistic upheavals that would reshape European culture later in the century. Today, the Bathers is recognized as a milestone in the history of modern art. What once appeared offensive in its bluntness is now understood as a bold refusal to compromise with convention. It stands as both a provocation and a manifesto, a declaration that the truth of painting lies not in mythic fictions, but in the real bodies, landscapes, and lives of Courbet's own world. Painted in 1854 and now housed in the Musée Fabre in Montpellier, Gustave Courbet's The Meeting, popularly known as Bonjour, Monsieur Courbet, stands as one of the artist's most emblematic works. The large canvas stages a peculiar encounter on a country road near Montpellier. Courbet, paintbox and parasol strapped to his back, confronts his patron Alfred Bruyas, accompanied by his servant Calas and his dog. At first glance, the scene appears simple, even anecdotal. Yet it is laden with artistic, social, and symbolic meaning that resonated deeply in the culture of 19th century France. Courbet depicts himself with remarkable authority, striding forward, taller than the other figures, and lit by the bright Mediterranean light. He occupies nearly as much pictorial space as the patron, servant, and dog combined. In contrast, Bruyas appears stiff, almost hesitant, his posture suggesting deference rather than mastery. Calas, meanwhile, bows his head in humble acknowledgement of the artist. This inversion of expected roles was striking. Instead of presenting the wealthy patron as the dominant figure, as Octave Tassert had done when portraying Bruyas in The Painter's Studio, 1853, Courbet positions himself as an independent, even commanding presence. The composition deliberately recalls the imagery of the wandering Jew, a popular legend of the eternal outcast condemned to walk the earth. Contemporary viewers, steeped in 19th century visual culture, would likely have recognized the parallel. By invoking this figure, Courbet fashioned himself as a solitary voyager, a man free from social constraints and beholden to no one. His beard, rugged dress, and purposeful stride reinforced this self-image as the apostle of realism, the artist wanderer bearing a new truth of art. In Courbet's own words, he sought the great, wandering, independent life of the gypsy. This assertion of artistic independence carried profound implications. Courbet was not merely defying convention in terms of composition and symbolism, he was also redefining the social contract between artist and patron. While Bruyas's financial support was crucial, Courbet refused subservience. By portraying himself eye to eye with his benefactor, he declared that realist art could not be reduced to a decorative commodity or a client's whim. It was, rather, an autonomous practice bound to the artist's vision of truth. Critics at the Paris Exposition of 1855, where the work was first shown, largely ridiculed the meeting. Many seized upon Courbet's apparent self-glorification, mocking the image as an allegory of fortune bowing before genius. Caricaturists exaggerated the scene further, showing Bruyas and his servant kneeling before the towering painter. Yet the derision only confirmed Courbet's reputation as defiant and uncompromising. For Bruyas himself, the painting was double-edged. While he admired Courbet's originality, he worried that critical attacks damaged his own prestige as a collector. In retrospect, however, the painting reveals more than personal ego. The meeting articulates Courbet's vision of the artist as a figure of social independence, negotiating but never submitting to the structures of wealth and power. By appropriating a religious and folkloric archetype, the wandering Jew, Courbet transformed his own image into one of both marginality and authority, estrangement and leadership. The work thus encapsulates the paradox of realism itself, rooted in the tangible world of roads, fields, and social relations, yet carrying a symbolic force that challenges hierarchies both artistic and societal. Today, the meeting is seen as one of Courbet's most significant self-representations, a visual manifesto that extends beyond portraiture into a statement on the autonomy of modern art. What 19th century critics dismissed as arrogance now appears as a profound reflection on the changing place of the artist in society, not as servant of patrons or traditions, but as an independent creator, wandering and free. painted between 1844 and 1854, The Wounded Man is among the most personal and enigmatic works of Gustave Courbet. Housed today in the Musée d'Orsay, Paris, the canvas presents the artist himself in a dramatic pose, leaning against a rocky backdrop, eyes cast upward, hand pressed to his chest where a deep wound seeps blood through his shirt. At once a self-portrait and a symbolic tableau, the painting reveals Courbet's complex negotiation between romantic heritage and his own emerging realist ethos. The canvas underwent a significant transformation during its decade-long evolution. Originally, the composition included a female figure tenderly resting on Courbet's shoulder. By 1854, however, he had painted her out, replacing her with a sword and a vivid bloodstain. This radical alteration shifted the painting's meaning from an intimate scene of companionship to an image of solitary suffering, aligning Courbet with the archetype of the wounded hero. Scholars have linked this change to the dissolution of his 14-year relationship with Virginie Binet, with whom he had a son. The excision of the woman may thus represent both personal rupture and Courbet's broader rejection of sentimental dependency. In stylistic terms, The Wounded Man still bears the imprint of Romanticism. The dramatic chiaroscuro, the upward gaze, and the theatricalized gesture recall the heroic self-portraits of Delacroix and Géricault. Yet Courbet's realism intrudes powerfully. The textures of fabric, the weight of the body, and the raw, unidealized depiction of blood insist upon the tangible over the allegorical. This uneasy negotiation reflects Courbet's position in the early 1850s, not yet the fully radical realist of the Stonebreakers or the Painter's Studio, but already distancing himself from mythological and sentimental convention. On a deeper level, the painting can be read as a philosophical self-meditation. By removing the consoling presence of the woman, Courbet stages himself as both victim and survivor, embodying the romantic ideal of the artist as martyr while simultaneously undermining it with unflinching realism. The sword and blood suggest violence, yet no clear narrative is provided. Is he a soldier, a lover betrayed, or simply an allegorical everyman? Courbet refuses resolution, offering instead an image of existential solitude. The Wounded Man thus anticipates the themes that would dominate Courbet's mature career: the assertion of artistic independence, the intertwining of personal experience with universal symbolism, and the confrontation of art with the raw realities of life. What might initially appear as a romantic self-dramatization becomes, in Courbet's hands, a transitional manifesto, a visual declaration that suffering, disillusionment, and the body itself are legitimate subjects of modern painting. Today, the work stands not only as a moving self-portrait, but also as a record of Courbet's passage from romantic inheritance to realist innovation. It is less the image of a wounded hero than that of an artist redefining heroism itself. No longer clothed in allegory, but bared in the uncompromising truth of lived experience. Wheat Sifters, Les Cribleuses de blé, 1854, Musée des Beaux-Arts de Nantes, exemplifie Gustave Courbet's realist ambition to elevate the lives of ordinary people into the domain of high art. Exhibited at the Salon of 1855 alongside other monumental works, it demonstrates Courbet's persistent refusal to idealize and his commitment to making actuality itself the foundation of modern painting. By portraying the labor of his native Franche-Comté with unsentimental fidelity, he asserted the dignity of a class of citizens hitherto excluded from the grand narratives of academic art. The painting depicts Courbet's sisters, Zoe and Juliette, absorbed in the domestic task of sifting wheat, with a young boy, possibly Désiré Binet, the artist's illegitimate son standing nearby. The artist deliberately eschews the genteel finery worn by the sisters in The Young Ladies of the Village, 1852, choosing instead to portray them as workers engaged in the physically demanding routine of preparing grain for bread. Zoe, clad in a striking red garment, dominates the composition with her muscular arms and broad shoulders, her vigorous movement charging the scene with palpable energy. Juliette, by contrast, appears exhausted, her posture slackening as though on the verge of sleep, while the stacked sacks of grain looming in the background silently underscore the magnitude of their labor. Courbet introduces a subtle theatricality by turning the principal figure away from the viewer. This compositional device draws us into the rustic chamber, positioning us as silent witnesses to the repetitive yet vital rhythms of domestic work. The sweeping ellipse of Zoe's sifting motion, combined with the fine trail of falling grain, generates a dynamic interplay between physical exertion and material detail, transforming what might appear mundane into a scene of profound visual drama. At the same time, the painting articulates a meditation on gender and social class. By foregrounding the strength and endurance of women's labor, Courbet subverts conventional artistic tropes that prized feminine beauty or passivity. Here, the woman is not an object of charm, but a figure of productivity and resilience, embodying the often overlooked foundation of rural subsistence. The boy and the cat, disengaged from the labor, accentuate this contrast, marking out spheres of exemption and dependence. The reception of the painting underscores its significance. After its exhibition at the 1855 Salon, The Wheat Sifters was presented at the 1861 show of the Society of Friends of Art in Nantes, where it was acquired for 4,000 francs by the Musée des Beaux-Arts. Its acquisition confirmed not only Courbet's growing recognition but also the institutional validation of his radical redefinition of subject matter. Through its earthy realism, compositional vigor, and insistence on the dignity of labor, The Wheat Sifters emerges as both a family portrait and a manifesto of realism, one that insists that truth, however unadorned, has an inherent grandeur worthy of the highest forms of art. Painted in 1855 in Ornans, and now housed in the Musée d'Orsay, the painter's studio, l'Atelier du Peintre, is Gustave Courbet's most programmatic statement of intent. Executed rapidly and on a large scale, the canvas was conceived as a summer of the artist's aspirations and the social world that shaped them. Courbet famously described it as representing society at its best, its worst, and its average. Rejected by the official jury of the 1855 Exposition Universelle, the painting became the focal point of Courbet's self-organized Pavillon du Réalisme, an act of institutional defiance that prefigured later artist-run exhibitions, notably the Salon des Refusés. The work therefore circulates between private authorship and public manifesto. It is both a studio view and an ideological tableau enacting the artist's program for realism. Formally, the composition is organized into a tripartite field, left, center, right each zone, bearing a distinct thematic charge. Courbet situates himself at the pictorial center, standing before an easel on which he paints the Loue Valley. His back is turned to a nude model whose pose and placement signal the artist's critical relation to academic tradition. The central axis is a site of luminous focus. Light models the body of the painter and the painted landscape, while peripheral groups are differentiated by contrasting handling tighter portrait-like modeling on the right, looser, darker passages on the left. The canvas within a canvas device, the loo on Courbet's easel, asserts both pictorial reflexivity and provincial allegiance. Technically, the painting juxtaposes finished portraiture, many right-hand figures derived from existing likenesses and photographs, with areas left deliberately sketchy, the unfinished works on the rear wall, producing a dialectic of completion and process that underscores the work's metapictorial theme. The painting is dense with emblematic figures and objects. The right group assembles Courbet's intellectual and financial interlocutors, Alfred Bruyas, Champfleury, Charles Baudelaire, Pierre-Joseph Proudhon-Figueres, who embody critical, literary and patronal support. Their presence indexes the social networks that sustain Courbet's practice. The left registers types of contemporary life: working poor, rag pickers, a Jewish merchant, an Irish woman, and a lay figure or cruciform dummy that commentators have read as the death of academic art. Objects clustered at the foot of the poacher-that's hunter, guitar, plumed hat, dagger, buckled shoe, are conventionally read as the residues of romantic costume and affect, signaling the decline of Romanticism. A skull placed atop a copy of the Journal des Débats has been interpreted as a memento mori directed at the Academy and its public discourse. The hunter figure is commonly taken as a satirical allusion to Napoleon III, thereby adding a veiled political polemic. The central child figures, the cat, and the studio's ordinary tools insist upon continuity transmission, apprenticeship, and the quotidian basis of artistic life. The oxymoron in the subtitle, Real Allegory, is the conceptual hinge of the painting. Courbet stages allegory without abandoning empirical specificity. Universals, art, society, death, patronage, are embodied in concrete, recognizable persons and objects. The central thesis is twofold. First, art must be returned to the world it depicts. The Loue Valley on the easel asserts provincial reality as legitimate pictorial subject. Second, art is social praxis. Courbet's studio gathers constituencies, friends, patrons, critics, laborers, so that painting appears as embedded in social relations rather than as an autonomous aesthetic spectacle. The dichotomy Courbet announces those who live on life, friends, workers, admirers, versus those who live on death, exploiters, profiteers, functions as both social critique and programmatic stance. Reading through contemporary political thought, scholars such as Linda Nochlin have suggested affinities with Fourierist notions of communitarian reorganization. The painting's mise en scène gestures toward a reordering of social relations anchored in cooperative production and shared cultural life. Contemporaneously, the painting's reception was polarized. The official jury's refusal and the lukewarm popular response to the Pavillon du Réalisme contrasted with isolated praise from figures like Eugène Delacroix, caricature and ridicule, especially directed at Courbet's apparent self-promotion and at the painting's iconography, attested to its provocation. Subsequent scholarship has reframed the work as foundational for modern artistic self-presentation. It prefigures later modernist discourses on the artist's social role and the studio as a symbolic site. Critical interpretations vary. Some read the canvas principally as autobiographical self-mythologizing. Others emphasize its sociological mapping of mid-century networks of taste, patronage, and radical politics. The painting's use of photographic sources and portrait copies has also attracted methodological attention, registering Courbet's engagement with emergent visual technologies and the modern media ecology. The painter's studio remains a paradigmatic articulation of realism's ambitions. It refuses both the escapism of romantic allegory and the narrow formalism of academic hierarchy, insisting instead that art be accountable to lived conditions and social constituencies. As a work of self-declaration, it establishes Courbet as a figure who imagines the artist not merely as image maker, but as social agent embedded in networks of labor, patronage, critique, and political belief. Its historical significance lies equally in its content and in the performative act of its exhibition, the Pavillon du Réalisme, which inaugurated a model of artist-led presentation that would reverberate through the 19th and 20th centuries. In short, the painting is both manifesto and map, a concentrated condensation of Courbet's aesthetic program and the social world from which that program arose. Painted between approximately 1852 and 1857, Madame Auguste Quoc belongs to the formative decade of Gustave Courbet's mature realism. These years marked Courbet's decisive challenge to the idealized portraiture that still dominated mid-19th century French art. In contrast to the prevailing academic taste for mythologized femininity, Courbet's approach was grounded in the truthful observation of the physical and psychological reality of his sitters. Exhibited later in his independent show of 1867, a bold move asserting his autonomy from the salon system, This portrait reflects Courbet's growing conviction that the artist must paint the world as it truly appears, unadorned and unidealized. The work portrays Mathilde Desportes, known as Madame Auguste Quoc, seated against a subdued dark background. The composition is intimate, yet monumental. Courbet's canvas is large in scale, yet the sitter fills the frame with an unembellished, direct presence. The palette muted browns, warm flesh tones, and a subtle play of light creates a quiet intensity that draws the viewer toward the sitter's steady gaze. There are no decorative accessories, no ostentatious jewelry or drapery. Instead, Courbet focuses on the immediacy of form, the physicality of flesh and fabric, and the psychological density that emanates from the woman's expression. Her figure, rendered with Courbet's characteristic dense brushwork, conveys both gravity and sensitivity. While Madame Auguste Quoc lacks overt symbolic content, it embodies Courbet's moral and aesthetic philosophy, his art of truth. The portrait refuses flattery or sentimentality, offering instead a confrontation with the real. This realism, paradoxically, becomes a kind of psychological revelation. Beneath the surface restraint lies an emotional depth that challenges the conventions of female portraiture in the Second Empire. The sitter's quiet strength and inward gaze may suggest dignity born from self-awareness, an assertion of individuality rather than ornament. In this sense, Courbet transforms a commissioned likeness into a meditation on human presence itself. Courbet's technique here demonstrates his mastery of painterly materiality, the thickly applied pigment, the visible brushstrokes, and the subtle gradations of tone collectively assert the hand of the artist. Unlike the smooth, polished finish of academic portraiture, Courbet's surface feels tactile, almost sculptural, as if modeling the sitter from clay rather than paint. The light falls softly, illuminating her face and the folds of her dress without theatrical contrast, allowing the viewer to sense time's passage and atmosphere. The painting's restrained chromatic range and weighty composition anticipate later developments in modern portraiture, influencing Manet, and through him, much of modern realism. When first seen, the portrait provoked discomfort, even rejection from its immediate audience. Madame Quoc's husband famously refused it, believing it failed to capture his wife's beauty. This reaction underscores Courbet's challenge to conventional expectations of portraiture. His refusal to idealize was seen as a denial of grace. Yet what once appeared unbeautiful now reveals its modern power, the insistence on authenticity over illusion. The painting's later acquisition by the Havmeyer family and its eventual donation to the Metropolitan Museum of Art testify to its re-evaluation within the canon of 19th century art. Today, Madame Auguste Quoc stands as a testament to Courbet's enduring defiance of the aesthetic norms of his era. In Madame Auguste Quoc, Courbet achieved a rare synthesis of monumentality and intimacy. He transformed a private portrait into a profound statement about realism, individuality, and the dignity of the human form. The painting's quiet force lies in its refusal to idealize, its solemn confrontation with reality, and its steadfast devotion to the truth of seeing. Within Courbet's oeuvre, it remains both exceptional and emblematic, a portrait that is, as one critic aptly observed, unusual in scale, intimate in feeling, and revolutionary in its honesty. Painted between late 1856 and early 1857, Les Demoiselles des Bords de la Seine was presented to the Paris Salon Jury and was accepted and exhibited on 15th June 1857, along with 2 portraits and 3 landscapes. Eventually, it was purchased by Courbet's friend and patron Étienne Baudry, 1830-1908, who left it to the artist's daughter Juliette, who in turn bequeathed it to the French state in 1906. Today, it hangs in the Petit Palais, an art museum in the 8th arrondissement of Paris. A smaller sketch of the subject is held in London's National Gallery. Courbet's painterly skill in rendering the fabrics of the young ladies is a salient feature of the canvas. His brushwork employs a subtle range of white tones, conveying the rich texture of the cashmere shawl and the lace-like muslin. The artist also demonstrates his confident handling of decorative patterns in the garments, adding to the impression of a sensuous scene. The composition features 2 reclining working-class girls, apparently enjoying the leisurely calm of a Sunday afternoon beside the River Seine. The figure closest to us, almost seeming to spill out into our plane, is apparently dressed in only her undergarments, as she dozes with a satiated expression of rapture. She wears fine, skin-tight, translucent yellow gloves, heightening the theme of thinly veiled eroticism. Beneath the leaves of the low tree, we can see a moored boat with a hat, suggesting the temporary absence of a male, likely to return at any moment. The other lady is located more in the background and appears distracted as she peers off into the left distance, lost in her thoughts. Perhaps she is thinking of her own love and has yet to have the same satisfaction as her companion. Whether they are innocent city shop girls, enjoying their Sunday afternoon with an unknown male friend, or, as some would argue, they are in fact among the many prostitutes that were known to offer their services to the gentlemen frequenting the Seine, is left to the viewer to decide. The implicit nature of the painting unsurprisingly provoked an outcry at the Salon. Even the use of the word demoiselles in the title was controversial. These 2 females were certainly not dressed as proper young ladies, nor were they acting with decorum. However, Courbet does not wish to censor these women, but is intent on ridiculing the severity of the class system in society. Why shouldn't these working-class women be regarded just as much as valid subjects for serious painting as the bourgeoisie women of society paintings? The reference to sexuality alone would not be an issue for the Salon jury. They were used to it being referenced often in distanced nudes from classical stories, such as the idealized forms of Venus and Diana. Yet, they were entirely uncomfortable with the contemporary presentation of sexuality that verged on the explicit. And of course, there was the hard-hitting message never absent from Courbet's work, confronting the establishment with an unrestrained dose of social truths. For this reason, Les Demoiselles des Bords de la Seine was regarded as far more sexually disturbing than the customary and more revealing nudes that were familiar to the Salon. Sleeping Nude, 1858, marks one of the most intimate and unguarded moments within Gustave Courbet's lifelong engagement with the representation of the female form. painted in oil on canvas and now housed in the National Museum of Western Art in Tokyo, the work exemplifies Courbet's realist commitment to portraying the human body with a candor that dispensed with myth, allegory, or academic idealization. Here, the nude is not a goddess or muse, but a woman seen in the unembellished state of repose, breathing, weighted, and tangible. In doing so, Courbet dismantles centuries of pictorial convention that transformed women into abstract symbols of beauty, restoring instead the immediacy of lived physicality. The composition presents a single sleeping woman lying on her side upon white sheets, her head turned slightly toward the viewer, her dark hair spilling across the pillow. The light falls gently across her body, revealing the supple tones of skin rendered through Courbet's characteristically dense, tactile brushwork. Unlike the theatrical nudes of the academic tradition, the scene conveys neither invitation nor spectacle. The woman is unaware of the viewer's gaze. She inhabits her own world, enclosed by the folds of fabric and the quiet rhythm of sleep. Courbet's realism here is not voyeuristic but revelatory, an attempt to paint the human body as it truly exists, unmediated by cultural myth or moral expectation. Within the broader context of 19th century painting, sleeping nude can be seen as a decisive step toward the modern conception of the nude. Courbet's contemporaries, including Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres and Alexandre Cabanel, still veiled the erotic under the language of mythology. Courbet, by contrast, discards all pretexts of narrative. His model is not Venus or Danae, but an anonymous woman whose body bears the subtle traces of humanity, the softness of flesh, the weight of gravity, the faint shadow of imperfection. In this sense, Courbet transforms the nude from an aesthetic abstraction into a study of truth itself. The painting's sensuous materiality also reflects Courbet's mastery of surface and pigment. His handling of paint gives the skin a living warmth, while the interplay of light and shadow creates the illusion of quiet breathing. The white drapery, thickly impasted, does not merely frame the body but becomes part of the same physical continuum. This unity between body and surrounding matter suggests a metaphysical assertion that the human form, like nature itself, exists within the same physical laws of texture, light, and weight. Courbet thus aligns the act of painting with the act of being. Both are processes of material revelation. Interpretively, Sleeping Nude can be read as an affirmation of Courbet's artistic creed. I cannot paint an angel because I have never seen one. His refusal to depict the idealized or the imagined culminates here in an image of unmediated presence. Yet beneath its calm surface lies a quiet radicalism. The unidealized nude, shown in a state of rest and vulnerability, challenged the moral conservatism of Second Empire France and paved the way for later artists, Edouard Manet, Edgar Degas, and the Impressionists, to explore the human form outside of convention. Courbet's nude is not performing beauty. She embodies it simply by existing. Today, Sleeping Nude endures as both a cornerstone of modern realism and a meditation on the relationship between truth and representation. Its stillness invites contemplation, not desire. Its light reveals presence, not perfection. Courbet's achievement lies in the courage to paint what is real, to find poetry in the ordinary and sanctity in the material. In the unguarded sleep of an unnamed woman, he discovered the quiet revolution of art itself. painted between 1861 and 1862, Nude Woman with a Dog exemplifies Gustave Courbet's pursuit of realism and his unflinching commitment to portraying the human body as it truly appears. Now housed in the Musée d'Orsay in Paris, the work embodies Courbet's sensual yet grounded approach to the female nude, diverging sharply from the idealized traditions of the French Academy. The composition captures a reclining woman whose natural curves dominate the pictorial space, her skin rendered with tangible warmth and tonal depth. A small dog rests beside her, an element that subtly infuses the scene with intimacy and domestic tenderness. Rather than presenting a mythological Venus or an allegorical figure, Courbet's subject is distinctly human-earthly, immediate, and unembellished. The painting's subdued color palette, alternating between flesh tones, muted fabrics, and shadowed interiors, anchors the viewer within a private, contemplative world. Courbet's handling of paint in this work remains deeply material and tactile. His brushwork, thick yet controlled, emphasizes texture over polish, endowing the skin, fabrics, and fur with palpable substance. Unlike the smooth idealization favored by academic painters, Courbet's surface insists on the physicality of oil paint itself. Through this technique, the artist transforms realism into an act of truth-telling, declaring that art need not flatter beauty to reveal its power. Nude Woman with a Dog also speaks to Courbet's broader philosophical rebellion. By situating the nude within a personal, recognizable environment, rather than an imagined classical realm, he collapses the divide between art and reality. The woman's unposed serenity suggests neither shame nor theatricality. She is present, embodied, and at ease within her own physical being. The small dog, long associated with fidelity and companionship, functions as both compositional balance and symbolic reinforcement of the scene's authenticity. When first conceived, works such as this unsettled many viewers. Courbet's insistence on depicting real bodies, imperfect, sensual, and mortal, challenged a culture accustomed to the marble-smooth divinities of the salon. Yet it is precisely this defiance that cemented his influence on later artists, from Manet and Renoir to the early modernists who sought sincerity over convention. The painting's realism thus extends beyond form into ideology, a declaration that the truth of flesh, with all its imperfections, possesses a beauty more enduring than idealized myth. Nude Woman with a Dog endures as one of Courbet's most tender yet radical nudes, bridging sensuality and veracity. It affirms his vision of art not as an escape from reality, but as a mirror to it, where even the quiet companionship of a woman and her dog becomes a profound testament to the dignity of the real. Femme nue couchée, 1862, occupies a provocative and pivotal position within Gustave Courbet's realiste œuvre. Painted during a period of both artistic maturity and controversy, the work embodies Courbet's radical redefinition of the nude, not as an idealized object of mythic beauty, but as an unflinching image of corporeal truth. In this canvas, a young dark-haired woman reclines upon a couch, wearing nothing but stockings and shoes. Behind her, red curtains frame an overcast sky glimpsed through a closed window, a compositional device that intensifies the sense of enclosure and voyeuristic intimacy. The result is a startling confrontation between the viewer's expectations, inherited from classical and romantic traditions of the nude, and Courbet's subversive assertion of realism. The historical and cultural context of Femmes nues couchées is deeply entwined with Courbet's broader rejection of academic conventions. By the early 1860s, French painting remained dominated by the lingering idealism of neoclassicism and the sensuous mythologies of Romanticism. Courbet, however, sought to strip art of these idealized veils, insisting that the artist should depict only what was real and present before the eyes. In Femmes nues couchées, he collapses the boundary between the sacred and the profane, between the goddess and the woman. The influence of Francisco Goya's La Maja Desnuda is unmistakable, yet Courbet's figure is more immediate, more tactile. She is no mythological Venus, but a living, breathing woman, unapologetically herself. In this, Courbet not only challenged the visual decorum of the time, but also the moral anxieties surrounding female sexuality and artistic representation. Compositionally, the painting demonstrates Courbet's command of both sensuality and structure. The woman's pale body, rendered with broad, confident brushstrokes, lies diagonally across the canvas, her form illuminated against the darker tones of the drapery and the muted, cloudy sky beyond. The red curtain functions as a visual and psychological frame, both concealing and revealing, suggesting the theatrical nature of the gaze. The choice to depict the woman still wearing stockings and shoes intensifies the erotic charge of the scene, subverting the traditional nude's pretense of timeless idealization by anchoring her firmly in the contemporary and carnal. Courbet's naturalism is unsparing yet deeply empathetic. His treatment of flesh conveys warmth and weight rather than perfection. Thematically, Femmes nues couchées serves as a bold meditation on the politics of looking. In confronting the viewer with a figure whose gaze is absent or withdrawn, Courbet reverses the dynamic of possession inherent in the classical nude. The woman's body is not offered as an object of passive contemplation, but presented as a subject of presence, indifferent to or even defiant of the viewer's scrutiny. This subtle psychological distance transforms the image from a display of beauty into an encounter with individuality and power. The painting thus participates in Courbet's larger humanist project, to reveal truth not through the refinement of form, but through the authenticity of being. The later history of Femmes nues couchées only amplifies its mythic aura. After changing hands among collectors and surviving the upheavals of war, the painting was looted from Budapest in 1945 and vanished for decades, only to resurface in the early 2000s under circumstances as dramatic as any in modern art restitution. Its recovery, after intricate negotiations and the involvement of Interpol, restored not only a lost Courbet masterpiece, but also a fragment of cultural memory long obscured by violence and displacement. The painting's rediscovery, and its eventual sale in 2015 for over $15 million, underscores the enduring fascination with Courbet's defiance of aesthetic and moral convention. Today, Femmes nues couchées is understood not merely as an erotic image, but as a cornerstone of modern visual thought. It anticipates later artistic explorations of the body by Edouard Manet, Amedeo Modigliani, and even Egon Schiele. Artists who, like Courbet, sought to reclaim the nude as a site of psychological and existential truth. The painting remains an icon of realism's challenge to idealization, a work in which beauty, stripped of allegory, reasserts itself through the power of presence, flesh, and light. The Source, 1862, occupies an intriguing position within Gustave Courbet's exploration of the nude as both a natural and philosophical subject. Painted at a mature stage in his career, the canvas reveals Courbet's ongoing interrogation of realism through the human form, particularly the female body. In this composition, a nude woman stands in the shallow edge of a stream, her figure surrounded by verdant foliage and fluid light. She reaches into the flowing water, as if communing with the very element from which life emerges. Courbet's decision to locate the figure outdoors, in nature, rather than in the confines of myth or allegory, is a conscious rejection of classical idealization and an assertion of a modern, embodied realism. Thematically, The Source continues Courbet's defiance of academic tradition while simultaneously engaging in subtle dialogue with it. The title itself recalls La Source, 1856, by Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres, a work that epitomized the neoclassical pursuit of purity and ideal beauty. Yet Courbet's response transforms the theme into something entirely different. His woman is not a stylized nymph, but a flesh and blood being, tactile and grounded. While Ingres's Source exudes an otherworldly calm and abstraction, Courbet's figure is imbued with earthiness, the sensual immediacy of a woman in the natural world, not separate from it. In doing so, Courbet transposes the mythological ideal into the language of realism, displacing the divine muse with the physical presence of humanity itself. Compositionally, Courbet employs a restrained yet powerful arrangement. The woman stands upright, her pale skin contrasting with the dark, mossy greens of the surrounding environment. The diagonal flow of water mirrors the gentle curve of her body, creating a subtle dialogue between the animate and inanimate. The play of light across her torso and the surface of the water imbues the scene with a quiet luminescence, suggesting a form of spiritual renewal, though one rooted not in divinity, but in the physical continuity between humanity and nature. The entire scene is devoid of ornamentation or theatrical gesture. Instead, Courbet's brushwork celebrates the weight and texture of existence. The identity of the model remains uncertain, and this ambiguity contributes to the painting's aura of mystery. Historical speculation suggests that she may have posed for Courbet more than once, yet her anonymity allows the work to transcend portraiture. She becomes, in essence, a symbol of womanhood's elemental connection to the natural world. Courbet, however, never indulges in sentimentality. His vision remains unflinching, his realism unsparing. The woman's form, rendered with sculptural solidity, asserts both presence and autonomy. She is not an object of passive contemplation, but a participant in the living environment, her gesture toward the water an act of communion rather than exhibition. When viewed in relation to Courbet's broader oeuvre, the source occupies a dialogue not only with Ingres's classicism, but also with later works such as Paul Gauguin's The Moon and the Earth, 1893, which similarly explores the relationship between the human body and elemental forces. Yet unlike Gauguin's symbolist allegory, Courbet's realism insists upon the here and now, upon the tactile immediacy of flesh and water, the rhythmic pulse of the natural world. His painting thus bridges the sensual and the philosophical, revealing how the human body becomes a conduit through which nature expresses its vitality. The source stands as a testament to Courbet's radical vision of realism, a vision that sought truth not through ideal beauty, but through the material harmony of existence. The painting's residence in the Metropolitan Museum of Art situates it among the great studies of modernity's early struggle with nature, body, and truth. It remains a meditation on the perpetual origin of life, rendered not as myth but as fact, the stream as both literal and symbolic source of being. Painted in 1863, Nude with Flowering Branch stands among Gustave Courbet's most lyrical explorations of sensual realism. Now housed in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, the work embodies Courbet's mature approach to the female form, earthly yet poetic, natural yet deeply evocative. Emerging during a decade when the artist's depictions of the nude were both celebrated and censured, this canvas encapsulates the delicate tension between realism and idealization that defined his oeuvre. The composition presents a reclining female nude, rendered with Courbet's characteristic density of flesh tones and palpable tactility. Her body, luminous under the painter's earthy palette, stretches diagonally across the picture plane, framed by dark foliage and the soft gleam of light that caresses her form. In her hand, she holds a flowering branch, an emblem both of renewal and of sensual vitality. The juxtaposition of human flesh and blossoming flora blurs the boundary between nature and body, suggesting an intrinsic unity between human life and the natural world. Courbet's brushwork remains vigorous and unembellished. He builds form through direct physical strokes that model the figure not with academic smoothness but with vitality and immediacy. His attention to tonal contrasts, warm flesh against cool green, shadow against highlight, intensifies the tactile realism of the scene. Unlike the ethereal nudes of his academic contemporaries, Courbet's woman inhabits the material world. Her body bears weight. Her skin breathes. She is both the subject and substance of painting itself. In the nude with flowering branch, Courbet's defiance of traditional mythological narratives reaches a serene balance. The absence of narrative pretext, no Venus, no allegory, invites the viewer to confront the nude as she is, independent of symbol or story. Yet the flowering branch introduces a subtle metaphor: the coexistence of beauty and transience, the cyclical renewal of life. Courbet's realism here is not a denial of poetry, but its redefinition through nature and flesh. The painting's quiet sensuality also gestures toward Courbet's philosophical materialism. For him, art was inseparable from the tangible world. His choice to present the female nude in direct relation to organic elements, flowers, soil, water, air, reflects his belief that truth resides in physical experience rather than abstraction. The work anticipates modern art's eventual liberation of the nude from mythic idealization, presenting instead a deeply human, embodied truth. Nude with Flowering Branch thus stands as a testament to Courbet's poetic realism, a vision where beauty and nature merge in their most immediate forms. In its unguarded sensuality and technical mastery, the painting bridges Courbet's realist convictions with the lyrical impulse that would later inspire symbolism and impressionism alike. Painted in 1862, the trellis belongs to the sequence of Gustave Courbet's mature works, in which sensual realism and natural observation converge. Now housed in the Toledo Museum of Art, this painting exemplifies Courbet's ability to intertwine the female body with the living rhythms of nature. Conceived during a period when his art oscillated between rural realism and the lyrical study of form, the trellis encapsulates the painter's meditation on the harmony between human presence and the natural world. The composition presents a young woman half-length, seen amid the climbing foliage of a garden trellis. Her bare shoulders emerge from the screen of green leaves, creating a striking contrast between the warm, tactile quality of flesh and the cool, chromatic depth of the surrounding vegetation. Courbet uses light to weave together these two registers, the body and the environment, so that neither dominates the other. The figure appears not as an intruder into nature, but as an organic extension of it, the human form blending seamlessly with the vegetal lattice. Courbet's handling of paint is richly material, with thick, confident strokes modeling the forms. His realism does not rest upon minute detail, but upon a visceral understanding of texture and weight. The creamy tones of the skin are set against deep, earthy greens, while subtle glints of light pass across the leaves and hair. This painterly tactility lends the work its physical immediacy. The spectator is made almost to feel the cool shade of the garden and the living warmth of the figure within it. Unlike the mythological nudes of academic painting, the trellis dispenses with allegory. Courbet's woman is neither Venus nor Flora. She exists in her own natural right. Yet the trellis itself, with its intertwining branches and growing vines, serves as a quiet metaphor. It evokes both enclosure and fertility, suggesting the continuity between nature's cycles and human vitality. Courbet's realism thus acquires a subtle symbolic resonance, an art of presence that gestures toward the eternal processes of growth and renewal. Formally, the work reveals Courbet's deep sensitivity to structure. The vertical lines of the trellis, softened by the rhythmic curves of leaves and hair, frame the woman's form with deliberate simplicity. The balance between organic and geometric elements gives the composition an underlying architectural order, a hallmark of Courbet's mature style. Through this interplay of pattern and spontaneity, Courbet transforms a moment of observation into an image of enduring poise. The trellis may be understood as a visual ode to the unity of the human and natural realms. In its serene sensuality and painterly vigor, the work anticipates later developments in symbolism and impressionism, where nature would again serve as a mirror for emotion and being. Courbet's woman, poised within her living lattice, becomes both subject and metaphor. She is the embodiment of life woven into the structure of the world. Painted in 1862, Bouquet of Flowers in a Vase, Man View, marks one of the rare yet deeply introspective moments in Gustave Courbet's oeuvre, when the artist turned his attention away from the human figure toward the silent vitality of nature. Now housed in the Paul Getty Museum in Los Angeles, this work demonstrates Courbet's exceptional sensitivity to form, color, and material substance, reaffirming his belief that the painter's task is not to idealize but to reveal the truth of what exists before the eye. Though Courbet is primarily celebrated as the founder of realism through his depictions of peasants, landscapes, and nudes, his floral still lifes occupy a distinctive place in his career, serving as quiet meditations on life's transience and the painter's own sense of mortality. In this canvas, a bouquet of vividly colored flowers, roses, peonies, and field blooms erupts from a dark, heavy vase set upon a simple table. The surrounding background is composed in subdued tones of brown and umber, against which the luminous petals seem to pulse with inner life. Courbet's brushwork is vigorous, dense, and tactile. Every stroke carries the physicality of his engagement with pigment. The flowers do not dissolve into delicate ornamentation but retain their sturdy presence, rendered with an almost geological solidity. In this, the still life becomes an extension of Courbet's landscapes, earth transformed into bloom. Courbet's realism here is both observational and emotional. While the composition appears spontaneous, it is carefully constructed to evoke balance amid abundance. The cluster of flowers swells upward in a pyramid-like formation, suggesting both growth and inevitable decay. The palette transitions from deep reds and ochres at the base to soft pinks and whites toward the top, creating a dynamic gradation of light. The contrast between vitality and shadow imbues the painting with a quiet tension, as if time itself were pressing upon the moment of full bloom. This still life, painted during a turbulent period of Courbet's life, may also be read as a personal allegory. Having faced growing controversy for his defiance of academic convention, Courbet found in floral compositions a meditative refuge, a realm where his materialism could unfold without the burden of politics or human narrative. The flowers, painted with the same earnest intensity as his monumental stonebreakers or wheat sifters, affirm his belief that all subjects, humble or grand, deserve equal dignity under the painter's hand. Formally, the painting reveals Courbet's mastery of texture and chiaroscuro. The thick impasto of the petals catches the light, contrasting sharply with the matte surface of the ceramic vase and the shadowed background. This interplay of roughness and delicacy, solidity and evanescence, defines Courbet's approach to realism not as mere reproduction, but as a dialogue between substance and perception. The flowers breathe, not through illusion, but through the weight and energy of the paint itself. Seen within the broader context of 19th century still life painting, Bouquet of Flowers in a Vase positions Courbet as both inheritor and innovator. He extends the tradition of Chardin's domestic realism and anticipates the sensuous immediacy later pursued by Manet and Cézanne. In Courbet's hands, the floral subject transcends prettiness to become an existential image, nature asserting its vitality within the confines of mortality and art. La Bretonnerie in the department of Indre, 1856, by Gustave Courbet, now housed in the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., stands as a serene yet powerful evocation of rural France. Painted during a period when Courbet sought refuge from the turbulence of Parisian artistic life, the work reflects his deep attachment to the landscape and his commitment to realism. Rather than presenting nature as an idealized vision, Courbet captures it as it is, unembellished, tangible, and full of lived presence. Created in the mid-19th century, this painting belongs to a decisive phase in Courbet's artistic philosophy, when he insisted on depicting the truth of what he saw. The tranquil countryside of Indre becomes a moral landscape, an image of authenticity and endurance set against the artificiality of the city. The muted palette of browns, greens, and greys grounds the composition in an earthy realism, while the diffused light, neither dramatic nor sentimental, evokes the stillness of a place untouched by spectacle. The absence of human figures paradoxically enhances the sense of human presence. The farmhouse, the damp meadow, and the surrounding trees all suggest the quiet labor and continuity of rural life. The painting's symbolism is subtle yet profound. The small dwelling nestled within the vastness of nature expresses stability, humility, and harmony values central to Courbet's worldview. The unadorned beauty of the land speaks of resilience and permanence, qualities he believed embodied the essence of the French countryside. In this sense, La Bretonnerie is not only a landscape, but also a declaration of faith in the enduring relationship between humankind and the earth. Beyond its aesthetic quietude, the work reveals Courbet's philosophical defiance. By stripping the landscape of grandeur, he challenged the prevailing romantic ideals of the sublime, replacing emotional excess with sensory immediacy. Courbet invites viewers not to dream of nature, but to confront it, to feel its weight, its air, and its silence. Through this, La Bretonnerie becomes a meditation on perception itself, suggesting that truth in art arises not from invention, but from observation. In its broader legacy, this painting prefigures the evolution of modern landscape art. Courbet's fidelity to the visible world deeply influenced the early Impressionists, Monet, Pissarro, and Sisley, who expanded his insistence on painting from life into their exploration of light and atmosphere. La Bretonnerie in the department of Indre thus bridges realism and modernity, serving as a cornerstone for the naturalist vision that defined 19th century French painting. Painted in 1860, La Roche Oraguay, Vallon de Mézières, Doux, the Oraguay Rock, Mézières Valley, Doux, exemplifies Gustave Courbet's deep attachment to his native Franche-Comté, a region whose rugged landscapes became both subject and symbol of his realist convictions. The work, now housed in the Museum Fabre, captures a limestone formation towering above the winding valley of the Doubs River. Its monumental stillness and earthy grandeur speak not only to the geological reality of the place, but to Courbet's desire to elevate the landscape of his homeland to the status of history painting. Courbet painted the scene with the precision of a geologist and the emotion of a patriot. The dense layering of pigments, built up with a palette knife rather than a brush, gives the rock its tactile solidity and the surrounding vegetation a vivid physical presence. The cloudy, diffused light suggests a moment suspended between storm and calm, a recurring atmospheric condition in Courbet's landscapes that enhances their sense of timeless endurance. The vantage point slightly below the rock intensifies the viewer's feeling of awe before nature's grandeur. Thematically, the painting transcends simple topography. Courbet transforms the rock into a metaphor for the endurance of his provincial roots against the encroachment of modernity and the artistic conventions of Paris. The Doubs Valley, familiar and unpretentious, becomes a stage upon which Courbet asserts his artistic independence. The restrained palette of greys, greens and ochres mirrors the honest beauty of the countryside, rejecting the idealized color harmonies favored by romantic landscape painters. This painting also represents Courbet's dialogue with nature as a living presence rather than a backdrop. His landscapes, unlike those of the Barbizon painters or the Romanticists, are devoid of narrative embellishment. The absence of human figures emphasizes the autonomy of the natural world, while the monumental scale of the rock hints at Courbet's belief that nature itself possesses a moral force. In this sense, La Roche Oraguay may be seen as a self-portrait in disguise, steadfast, unyielding, and defiantly authentic. The influence of this landscape tradition can be traced forward to the symbolists and early modernists, who admired Courbet's fusion of materiality and emotion. Painters like Cézanne and Pissarro would later adopt his focus on the structural power of the natural world, while still preserving the tension between observation and expression that Courbet pioneered. From a critical standpoint, La Roche-Auragüe, Vallon de Mézières, Doubs exemplify Courbet's genius in merging realism with transcendence. What appears to be a simple geological study becomes, under his brush, an allegory of endurance of nature, of the artist, and of a provincial truth standing firm against metropolitan artifice. The painting embodies the credo Courbet once declared, "I cannot paint an angel because I have never seen one." Here, what he has seen, a rock, a valley, a play of light, becomes more profound than any imagined vision. Painted with quiet reverence and formal mastery, View of Ornans by Gustave Courbet offers an intimate portrayal of the artist's birthplace in the Franche-Comté region, now held in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. This landscape is both a declaration of belonging and an early manifesto of Courbet's realist principles. Unlike the idealized vistas of romantic painters, Courbet's view of Ornans is grounded in observation, a faithful depiction of the familiar valley, river, and clustered rooftops of his native town, rendered with a humility that reveals profound affection for the ordinary. Courbet's composition presents the Lou River as it winds gently through the valley, dividing the town from the surrounding hills. The subdued light and earthy palette of grays, greens, and browns convey the atmosphere of a region defined more by endurance than grandeur. His method of building up paint with a palette knife rather than a delicate brush creates a dense material surface, emphasizing the tactile reality of stone, soil, and water. The scene feels at once lived in and eternal, an image of permanence drawn from the textures of rural life. Beneath the apparent simplicity of the composition lies a deeply personal meaning. For Courbet, Ornans was not merely a setting, but the very foundation of his artistic and moral identity. By portraying his village with the gravity traditionally reserved for historical or religious subjects, he elevated the provincial landscape to a universal symbol of authenticity and rootedness. In doing so, he challenged the Parisian art establishment's hierarchy of subjects, affirming that truth and beauty could be found outside the capital's mythic ideals. The painting also reflects Courbet's broader vision of realism as a moral and philosophical stance. His approach to landscape was neither nostalgic nor sentimental. Rather, it was an assertion of the coexistence between humanity and nature. The view is unpopulated yet profoundly human. The town's presence amid the land hints at labor, continuity, and the rhythms of daily life. It is this synthesis of observation and empathy that distinguishes Courbet's landscapes from those of his predecessors. Courbet's view of Ornans would later inspire generations of artists seeking to reconcile personal geography with universal meaning. Its honest depiction of place influenced the Impressionists' devotion to plein-air painting, as well as Cézanne's structural understanding of the landscape as a means of expressing permanence and truth. From an art critical perspective, View of Ornans stands as a cornerstone of Courbet's Realism, a painting where artistic technique, personal conviction, and philosophical depth converge. The work is not merely a record of a beloved town, but a declaration that every landscape, however modest, contains the essence of human experience. In its quiet power, Courbet's Ornans becomes not only the home of the artist, but a metaphor for the steadfast dignity of the realist vision itself. Gustave Courbet's A Brook in a Clearing, possibly titled Brook, Valley of Fontcouverte, study, painted in 1862, is a serene yet powerful evocation of nature's inner vitality, now housed in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York. In this work, Courbet captures a secluded woodland scene with a stream winding through a lush green clearing. The dense foliage, moss-covered rocks, and dappled light filtering through the trees reveal his mastery of plein-air observation. Unlike the idealized landscapes of academic tradition, Courbet's rendering is visceral and direct, a dialogue between the artist and the living matter of nature itself. The painting's composition conveys both intimacy and monumentality. The brook, with its rippling reflections, acts as a living artery that animates the forest. The earthy tones and tactile brushwork demonstrate Courbet's physical engagement with paint, as if he were sculpting the terrain from pigment. The absence of human figures further deepens the viewer's immersion in this silent, breathing world. Courbet's choice to study such an unassuming corner of the natural landscape reflects his realist philosophy, the conviction that truth lies not in grandeur, but in the immediacy of what one sees and feels. Here, nature becomes both subject and spirit, embodying the same untamed independence that defined Courbet himself. Today, A Brook in a Clearing stands as a testament to Courbet's ability to merge raw observation with emotional depth, transforming a modest study into a meditation on nature's eternal presence. Gustave Courbet's The Snow-Covered Forest, 1862, now in the Marubeni Gallery, is a masterful study of solitude and silence within nature's frozen stillness. In this work, Courbet depicts a dense forest blanketed in snow, where the muffled atmosphere evokes both serenity and isolation. The towering trees, rendered with earthy browns and deep greens beneath layers of white, create a rhythmic structure that draws the eye inward into a space where time seems suspended. The subdued palette and diffused light capture not only the chill of winter, but also the profound quiet that follows a snowfall. Courbet's technique reveals his physical rapport with the landscape. His thick, almost sculptural brushstrokes lend weight to the snow, while the interplay of shadow and reflection brings depth to the scene. The painting's power lies in its restraint. No dramatic sky, no narrative figures, only the raw poetry of nature itself. This winter landscape embodies Courbet's realist conviction that truth and beauty dwell in the immediacy of the natural world. Through texture and tone, he transforms an ordinary forest into a vision of spiritual calm, where nature's grandeur emerges through simplicity. The snow-covered forest thus stands as a meditation on transience and endurance, an image of life stilled yet quietly enduring beneath the snow. Gustave Courbet's A Brook at Le Puy Noir, near Ornans, 1864, housed in the Harvard Art Museums, captures the secluded poetry of the Jura landscape that so deeply shaped the artist's vision. In this painting, Courbet portrays a shadowed brook winding through the ravine of Le Puy Noir, a place near his native Ornans, famed for its dark waters and dramatic rock formations. The subdued light filters through the dense foliage, glimmering faintly on the surface of the water. Every detail, the mossy stones, the damp air, the interplay of reflection and shadow, reveals Courbet's profound sensitivity to the living texture of nature. Executed with his characteristic impasto, the painting conveys a palpable sense of materiality. Courbet's brush seems to carve the landscape as much as paint it, transforming pigment into earth, water, and stone. His dark tonal harmonies evoke a deep stillness, a kind of spiritual solitude where the viewer can almost hear the soft murmur of the brook. This work reflects Courbet's mature realism, no longer preoccupied with narrative or figure, but entirely devoted to the truth of place, to the intimacy of nature, seen, felt, and remembered. Through this secluded landscape, Courbet transforms a familiar corner of his homeland into a meditation on permanence and mystery. Deer Running in the Snow by Gustave Courbet, currently housed in the Artisan Museum, Ishibashi Foundation in Cho City, Japan, exemplifies the painter's unique ability to merge movement, atmosphere, and emotion within the natural landscape. Painted during the mid-19th century, deer running in the snow belongs to a period in which Courbet had firmly established his reputation as a pioneer of realism. By this time, he had turned increasingly toward landscapes and animal subjects, exploring the vitality and drama of the natural world. The harsh winters of his native Franche-Comté, with their vast forests and remote valleys, deeply informed his vision, allowing him to depict nature not as an idealized backdrop, but as a living, dynamic force. Courbet approached nature with an unflinching directness that rejected the polished conventions of academic art. In this work, he sought to capture the spontaneous energy of a single, fleeting moment. A deer in mid-flight through the snow. His technique, characterized by thick impasto and expressive brushstrokes, mirrors the vitality of the scene itself. Unlike romantic depictions of nature as sublime and distant, Courbet's approach is grounded, physical, and immediate. The painting's composition is defined by sharp contrasts of tone and texture. The warm brown body of the deer cuts through the pale expanse of snow, creating a tension between motion and stillness. Courbet's heavy application of white and grey pigment suggests the density of snow and the muffled silence of winter air. The forest recedes into shadow, its darkness evoking both protection and peril. Symbolically, the painting captures the fragility of life in the midst of overwhelming natural forces, a recurring motif in Courbet's later works. Beyond its surface realism, deer running in the snow can be read as an allegory of instinct and survival. The deer's motion embodies both fear and resilience, reflecting humanity's own struggle within an untamed world. Courbet's empathy for the animal mirrors his broader philosophy, that all living beings, human or otherwise, are inseparable from the rhythms of nature. The painting thus becomes a meditation on existence itself, suspended between vulnerability and vitality. This painting anticipates later developments in modern art, particularly the Impressionists' fascination with light, texture, and fleeting movement. Courbet's tactile realism and emotional immediacy would influence artists such as Manet and Cézanne, who shared his desire to render truth without embellishment. Within Courbet's oeuvre, deer running in the snow stands as one of his most poetic statements on the unity between animal life and the landscape that sustains it. Viewed today, deer running in the snow remains a profound testament to Courbet's ability to animate the ordinary with monumental intensity. The painting's raw brushwork and atmospheric power draw the viewer into the pulse of nature itself. It is not merely a scene observed, but an experience felt, a masterful synthesis of movement, emotion, and material presence that epitomizes Courbet's enduring realism. Fox in the Snow, 1860, by Gustave Courbet, housed in the Dallas Museum of Art, stands as one of the artist's most powerful meditations on the raw, untamed energy of nature. It marks a turning point in Courbet's evolution from social realism toward a more elemental, almost primal engagement with the natural world. The The painting captures a single moment of violent grace. A fox lunging through the snow, its motion frozen by the artist's brush, yet vibrating with tension and instinct. Created during Courbet's retreat to his native Franche-Comté, the work reflects his deep familiarity with the forests, valleys, and rugged terrain that had shaped his artistic vision. Unlike his earlier portrayals of peasant life, Fox in the Snow dispenses with human presence altogether. What remains is nature itself indifferent, harsh and alive. Courbet transforms this landscape into a stage where the drama of existence plays out in its purest form. Compositionally, the painting is both dynamic and tightly controlled. The fox erupts diagonally from the left foreground, its reddish fur flashing against the stark white snow. The brushwork is vigorous, almost sculptural. Thick impastos create the illusion of snow kicked into motion, while subtle tonal contrasts evoke the chill air and the tension of pursuit. Courbet's manipulation of light fragmented, directional, and unidealized heightens the sense of immediacy, situating the viewer within the visceral moment of the hunt. Symbolically, the fox embodies cunning, resilience, and isolation qualities that resonate with Courbet's own self-image as an artistic rebel. The desolate winter setting mirrors his belief in the struggle inherent in both nature and creative life. Yet beneath the harshness lies empathy. Courbet's gaze upon the animal is neither sentimental nor detached, but profoundly humane. The fox, though small and vulnerable, asserts its vitality against a vast, indifferent world. Beyond its naturalistic precision, Fox in the Snow approaches the metaphysical. It reveals Courbet's conviction that truth in art resides not in idealized beauty, but in the physical reality of existence. The painting's tension between motion and stillness, life and the cold silence of the landscape suggests a universal rhythm, an eternal cycle of survival and decay. This work anticipates modern tendencies toward expressive realism, influencing later artists such as Monet and Cézanne, who admired Courbet's direct handling of paint and his rejection of artifice. The emotional immediacy and tactile force of the canvas point toward the modern conception of painting as both a record of perception and an embodiment of the artist's physical engagement with the world. Today, Fox in the Snow remains a haunting testament to Courbet's unique vision, a union of observation and emotion, matter and meaning. It is not merely an image of a creature in motion, but a statement about life's persistence amid nature's indifference. A profound reflection of the realist credo that all truth, however fleeting, begins in the world as it is. The deer, 1865, now housed in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, captures the artist's deep reverence for the natural world and his mastery of realist expression through both observation and emotion. Emerging from his mature period, This painting reflects Courbet's growing fascination with animal subjects, particularly the deer, a recurring motif that embodies the untamed vitality and melancholy solitude of the wilderness he so passionately admired. Painted during Courbet's retreat to his native Franche-Comté, the deer reveals the artist's devotion to representing nature as it truly appears, raw, dignified, and unembellished. The stag, standing against a shadowed woodland background, is rendered with a sculptural solidity that commands attention. Courbet's vigorous brushwork and tactile handling of pigment give the animal's fur and antlers a striking physicality, as though they might emerge from the canvas. The setting is austere and somber, evoking the damp chill and stillness of the forest after rainfall. Rather than depicting a dramatic hunt or violent struggle, Courbet presents the deer in a moment of stillness and introspection. Its gaze, alert yet distant, captures a poignant tension between strength and vulnerability. The atmosphere is thick with silence, a silence that amplifies the creature's solitary majesty. Here, Courbet departs from the sentimental animal painting traditions of his contemporaries, transforming his subject into a symbol of endurance and spiritual presence within nature's vast indifference. In formal terms, the muted palette of earthy browns and deep greens contributes to the painting's meditative tone. Light filters softly through the trees, striking the deer's hide with restrained highlights that articulate both volume and life. Courbet's brushwork oscillates between meticulous modeling and loose, expressive passages, embodying the tension between realism and painterly abstraction that defines his mature style. Interpretively, the deer can be seen as a self-reflective image and emblem of the artist himself, standing defiant yet isolated amid the encroaching shadows of society and convention. Just as the deer inhabits the liminal space between wilderness and civilization, Courbet stood between the romantic past and the emerging modern sensibility. The painting resonates with a quiet dignity, testifying to Courbet's belief that truth and beauty lie not in idealization, but in the unvarnished realities of existence. In the broader trajectory of Courbet's oeuvre, the deer serves as a bridge between his early rural realism and his later more poetic explorations of landscape and solitude. It anticipates the emotional naturalism of later masters such as Rosa Bonheur, and even hints at the psychological depth that would inform symbolist depictions of nature. Ultimately, the deer stands as a profound statement on the harmony and the estrangement between living beings and their environment. Through its subdued drama and meditative power, the painting conveys Courbet's unwavering dedication to rendering the natural world as both subject and metaphor, a mirror for the human spirit's quiet resilience before the vast, unchanging rhythms of nature. In the late 1850s, Courbet continued to work in France, in spite of the severe criticism he constantly faced. For many, he was the undisputed model for a new generation of painters who had turned away from the traditional schools of painting that they deemed as barriers to artistic inspiration. Courbet worked in all genres, and he executed admirable portraits, noted for his adept technique of capturing a likeness. In January 1865, the sudden death of the socialist philosopher Pierre-Joseph Proudhon stirred Courbet to paint a tribute to his fellow Franche-Comtois, whom he had known since his late 20s. Proudhon was a politician and founder of mutualist philosophy. He was the first person to declare himself an anarchist, and is widely regarded as one of the ideology's most influential theorists. He became a member of the French Parliament after the Revolution of 1848, when he referred to himself as a federalist. Proudhon favored workers' associations or cooperatives as well as individual worker-peasant possession over private ownership or the nationalization of land and workplaces. Still, he considered social revolution to be achievable in a peaceful manner. Courbet was a great admirer of Proudhon's achievements and was noticeably upset when the socialist leader passed away. To a friend, the artist wrote, "The 19th century has lost its pilot and the man it has produced." No doubt Proudhon's philosophy of democracy and human progress, influenced by the thinking of Charles Fourier, were important to the radical Courbet. Proudhon's anti-authoritarian stance led to his imprisonment and exile, though it won him the devotion of a disciple in Courbet, who overlooked his friend's moralistic and indeed Philistine views on art. For many years, the artist had wanted to produce a portrait of the socialist, but he was an unwilling sitter and always managed to avoid agreeing to the numerous requests. Therefore, Courbet had to write to another friend in Paris, asking him to send over several photographs of Proudhon to aid him with his projected portrait. In the letter, Courbet describes the wish to produce a monument for his mentor, which would rise above the crowds. The scene depicted is of the philosopher in 1853, 12 years before the canvas was begun, as shown by the date inscribed on a step to the left. PJP 1853. Courbet likely selected this year as it was when La Philosophie du Progrès, one of Proudhon's most seminal books, was published and duly banned. Courbet presents Proudhon as a life-sized figure in a domestic setting, relaxing on the back steps of his unassuming house, while watching his two daughters at play. Proudhon wears a workman's tunic and simple hat, though his books and writing materials confirm his status as a man of letters. His thoughtful expression adds to the complicated mixture of working-class artisan and intellectual. Courbet would have appreciated how the socialist's family, like his own, had progressed in social standing through their industry and merits. Courbet has not chosen to present Proudhon as a bohemian figure, but instead as the father figure of his own family, attended by his daughters. One girl is learning her alphabet, while the other is content to play with teacups and a pitcher, signaling their contrasting natures. Originally, Courbet had included the figure of Madame Proudhon, seated on the chair and noticeably pregnant. However, when the painting was exhibited at the Salon of 1865, the widow objected to her presentation, and Courbet had to remove her from the painting. Now, the absent mother is represented by the sewing basket and a pile of linen on the empty chair. Completed in 1866, Le Sommeil is one of Courbet's most erotic paintings, depicting a scene of lesbianism. The provocative canvas was commissioned by the Turkish diplomat and art collector of the late Ottoman era, Halil Sherif Pasha, who had lived in Paris since 1860. Pasha had given up the life of a diplomat, choosing instead the role of a bon vivant and grand art collector. He amassed an incredible body of French artworks, including Ingres's famous Turkish bath. Le Sommeil is believed to have been inspired by Charles Baudelaire's poem Delphine et Hippolyte from his collection Les Fleurs du Mal. Held today in the collection of the Petit Palais, the canvas portrays two naked women lying asleep on a bed entwined in an erotic embrace, appearing to rest after sexual intercourse. The bedroom is decorated with various textiles and ornamental furnishings, adding to the exoticism. In the background, there is a dark blue velvet curtain, and in the right corner a table with a decorative flower suggests splendor. In the foreground, there are three items positioned on a small wooden table: a colored flacon, a small vessel, a transparent crystal vase, and a cup. The broken string of pearls serves as a symbol for unbridled passion. Except for these few furnishings, there is nothing to overshadow the focal point of the image, the erotic pose of the women, which seizes our attention. The women's flesh is replicated with a shimmering light, blending with the varied palette of whites and pinks of the surrounding fabrics. One of the women is a redhead, while the other is brunette. The contrast stresses that these lovers are two women, with no suggestion of a man present. The sinuous curves of their limbs and bodies are denoted with separate lines, accentuating their acts of love. The painting achieved such a scandal that it was not permitted to be shown publicly until 1988. Indeed, when Le Sommeil was first exhibited by a picture dealer in 1872, it became the subject of a police report. By that time, Khalil Bey had been financially ruined and was forced to sell his collection. Courbet was subsequently denounced for his moral turpitude. One of the models for the painting was Joanna Heffernan, who was the mistress of fellow painter James Abbott Whistler. Whistler's relationship with Heffernan ended soon afterwards, and he was very unhappy with Courbet for including her in his composition. Such an explicit depiction of an erotic relationship between two women had not occurred in the tradition of high art prior to Courbet's Le Sommeil. Despite its public ban, it would have an immense impact on the course of 19th century erotic art, as numerous artists were influenced by the theme of lesbian couples. In time, repetition of the theme helped to lower the taboos associated with these subjects. Courbet's paintings of the 1850s had striven to elevate the provincial people of his country as serious subjects for art. Now he was trying to do the same for homosexuals, whom society customarily judged as wicked and vile. Although it is true that Courbet painted the canvas for the enjoyment of a male, it still stands a powerful example of challenging society's prohibited views on sexuality. The artist had once more metamorphosed a subject previously held as vulgar and proscribed into a piece of astonishing artistry. A lover of women, Courbet liked to glorify the female nude in paintings of stunning warmth and sensuality. L'Origine du Monde is one of the most provocative and intimate depictions of the female nude in the history of Western art. The canvas was completed in 1866 and presents a close-up view of the genitals and abdomen of a naked woman as she lies on a bed with her legs open. The framing of the nude body, with head, arms, and lower legs outside of our view, emphasizes the eroticism of the painting with an unprecedented detailed view of the model's vagina. During the 19th century, the display of the nude body underwent a revolution, chiefly inspired by the works of Courbet and Manet. The former rejected academic painting and its smooth, idealized nudes, preferring instead the more everyday depictions of real women in everyday life, not romanticized tales of fantasy. Courbet was appalled by the hypocritical social conventions of the Second Empire, where eroticism and even pornography were acceptable in mythological works. Courbet insisted he never lied in his paintings, and his pioneering realism pushed the limits of what was considered presentable. Even today, the graphic nudity of L'Origine du Monde, with its close picture plane to the viewer, still has the power to shock and trigger censorship. For years, art historians have speculated upon the identity of model, with many suggesting his favorite model, Johanna Hiffernan, whose lover at the time was Whistler. She was the subject of a series of 4 portraits by Courbet entitled La Belle Irlandaise, Portrait of Jo, painted in 1865 or 66. The possibility that she was having an affair with Courbet might explain his subsequent bitter falling out with Whistler a short while later. Although Hiffernan had noticeable red hair, contrasting with the darker pubic hair of L'Origine du Monde, the attribution of Hiffernan as the model continues to be considered. In February 2013, the Courbet expert Jean-Jacques Fernier authenticated a painting of a young woman's head and shoulders as the upper section of L'Origine du Monde, which according to some was severed from the canvas. Fernier went on to announce that due to the conclusions reached after 2 years of analysis, the head will be added to the next edition of the Courbet Catalogue Raisonné. However, the Musée d'Orsay, where the painting is held, have indicated that L'Origine du Monde was not part of a larger work. Other documentary evidence links the painting with Constance Queneau, a former dancer at the Paris Opera and a mistress of the Ottoman diplomat Halil Sherif Pasha, who commissioned this painting as well as the previous featured plate. According to the historian Claude Chope and the head of the French National Library's Prints Department, Sylvie Aubenas, the evidence is found in correspondence between Alexandre Dumas-Fils and Georges Sand. Halil Sherif Pasha is believed to have commissioned the work shortly after he moved to Paris, after being introduced to Courbet by Charles-Augustin Sainte-Beuve. Pasha ordered a painting to add to his personal collection of erotic pictures, which already included the Turkish bath and the sleepers. After Pasha's finances were ruined by gambling, the painting passed through a series of private collections. It was first bought at the sale of the Pasha collection in 1868 by the dealer Antoine de Lanade. Edmond de Goncourt then discovered it in an antique shop in 1889, hidden behind a wooden pane decorated with the painting of a castle in a snowy landscape. According to Robert Fernier, who published 2 volumes of the Courbet Catalogue Raisonné and founded the Musée Courbet, the Hungarian collector Baron Ferenc Hatvany bought the canvas at the Bernheim Jeune Gallery in 1910 and took it with him to Budapest. Towards the end of the Second World War, it was looted by Soviet troops, but later ransomed by Hatvany. When Hatvany left Hungary, During the communist takeover of 1947, he was permitted to take only one artwork with him to Paris, and he chose L'Origine du Monde. In 1955, the painting was sold at auction for 1.5 million francs to its new owner, the psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan. He and his wife, actress Sylvia Bataille, installed it in their country house in Guitrancourt. Lacan asked the artist André Masson, his stepbrother, to build a double-bottom frame and to draw another picture to accompany it, a surrealist, elusive version of the original work. The explicit nature of the painting has served as an inspiration to numerous artists. A satirical twist was provided by Marcel Duchamp's last major work, Étant donné, which also features the image of a woman lying on her back with her legs spread. In 1989, the French artist Orlan created the Cibachrome L'Origine de la Guerre, The Origin of War, a male version of the original, showing a penile erection. Brazilian artist Vic Muniz went on to produce two versions of the painting. The first is a photograph made of dust and dirt, which plays with the common moralist association between female genitalia and filth. In the second, the painting is constructed from an assemblage of journal clippings reminiscent of anatomic and artistic procedures. In La Femme au Perroquet, Courbet presents a reclining nude rendered with the confident naturalism that defined his mature style. Exhibited at the Paris Salon of 1866, notably the first of his nudes the jury accepted, the painting balances academic polish with Courbet's signature earthiness. A young woman stretches languidly across rumpled white sheets, her hair loose and unruly, her garments abandoned at her side. Perched lightly on her raised hand is a green parrot, its wings half open as if caught in mid-flutter. Courbet paints her skin in smooth, luminous tones, echoing classical tradition, yet the intimate disorder of the scene, the tousled hair, the casually discarded clothing, subtly challenges the salon's expectations of decorum. The model is widely believed to be Joanna Hiffernan, Courbet's companion and frequent muse, whose presence anchors the composition with a quiet, sensuous self-assurance. The contrast between her relaxed pose and the bird's lively motion gives the work a playful, spontaneous energy unusual in conventional academic nudes. Though less provocative than Le Sommeil from the same year, La Femme au Perroquet signaled Courbet's ability to navigate between official taste and his own realist convictions. Today it hangs in Gallery 811 of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where its mix of polish, immediacy, and understated rebellion continues to captivate viewers. In The Woman in the Waves, Gustave Courbet presents a striking and unidealized vision of the female nude, rendered with the artist's characteristic directness and material sensitivity. Emerging from a dark, turbulent sea, the woman lifts her arms above her head, her body illuminated by a cold, silvery light that heightens both her physical presence and her emotional ambiguity. She is neither mythological nor allegorical. She is simply a woman, raw and immediate, confronting the viewer with a gaze that feels both intimate and unreachable. Courbet's realism is unmistakable here. The texture of the skin, the wetness of the hair, and the weight of the rising waves all reveal his commitment to representing nature and the human body without embellishment. The sea is not a symbolic backdrop, but a living physical force that nearly engulfs her. In this tension between body and water, Courbet creates a moment suspended between vulnerability and power. The woman appears exposed, yet also elemental, as though she herself were born of the shifting tide. The composition is tightly framed, cutting away the horizon and focusing entirely on the immediacy of the form. This closeness intensifies the painting's emotional charge. The viewer is not simply observing, but drawn into the space where water, light, and flesh converge. Courbet's brushwork, earthy, tactile, and boldly confident, heightens this sense of embodied realism, offering a counterpoint to the sleek academic nudes favored in Paris at the time. Though not as provocative as some of Courbet's other works, The Woman in the Waves remains a powerful statement of his artistic convictions. It captures the essence of Courbet's vision, the world as it is, sensuous and unidealized, anchored in physical truth yet capable of profound emotional resonance. Painted around 1865, Jo the Beautiful Irish Woman belongs to a compact yet evocative series of 4 portraits created during Gustave Courbet's months in Trouville. These works portray Joanna Heffernan, the Irish model known for her vivid red hair and for her close artistic ties with James McNeill Whistler. The unusual use of her first name in the title marks a rare moment of familiarity and individuality in mid-19th century portraiture, situating the series within an intimate artistic triangle along the Normandy coast. Courbet had explored mirror motifs earlier in his career, but the Jo series represents a more personal, finely tuned development of the theme. Working alongside Whistler, he sharpened his attention to surface textures, light modulation, and the truthful rendering of flesh. The realism here is resolute, yet tender, avoiding idealization while focusing on Jo's palpable presence, her luminous skin, the rich tumble of her auburn hair, and the concentrated intelligence of her expression. Across the 4 canvases, Jo appears in 3/4 view before a mirror, creating a subtle conversation between viewer, sitter, and the reflected image. The pared-down background forces attention onto her form, highlighting Courbet's vigorous brushwork and the chromatic depth of her hair. The mirror serves not as a symbol of vanity but of self-awareness. Jo is portrayed as someone looking, thinking, occupying her own inner world rather than simply being looked at. Read this way, the series becomes a study of identity and agency in portraiture. By naming Jo outright and presenting her in a moment of introspection, Courbet challenges conventions that rendered women anonymous or purely ornamental. Her poised inward expression suggests autonomy, and the collaborative circumstances of the paintings underscore her role as more than a passive muse. She becomes a link between Courbet and Whistler, embodying a shared, realist pursuit. Dispersed today across several major museums, the Jo portraits stand as pivotal works in Courbet's portrait practice and in the broader evolution of 19th century figuration. They reveal how models could shape artistic vision and how realism could honor individuality without sentimentality. Their lasting appeal resides in that blend of intimacy and gravity, a clear, unembellished humanity that continues to draw modern viewers into Jo's quiet, compelling presence. The painting's journey mirrors its enduring significance. From Hinlopen's private collection, it passed through the Gilvink family, later entering Catherine the Great's holdings in St. Petersburg via the art dealer Gotskowski, eventually transferred to the Museum Rumyantsev in Moscow, and then to the Pushkin Museum in 1924, it remains one of the masterpieces of Rembrandt's late period. Critics often regard it as among the finest works of his final decade. A meditation on moral destiny rendered with unparalleled spiritual and psychological insight. In its restrained grandeur, Ahasuerus and Haman at the Feast of Esther stands as one of the most haunting achievements of Western art. Painted between 1869-1870, The Wave, or The Waves, belongs to Courbet's most intense and elemental explorations of the sea, created during his stays along the Normandy coast. These canvases emerged at a moment of personal upheaval and artistic transformation, marking a decisive turn toward landscape as a vehicle for raw, unmediated emotion. The timing coincides with widening political tensions and Courbet's own growing disillusionment, and these pressures seem to reverberate within the explosive surfaces of the sea. Courbet approached these seascapes with a realist conviction sharpened by direct observation. Working outdoors in stormy conditions, he rejected idealized marine traditions and instead sought the physical truth of the ocean, its weight, density, and motion. His method fused thick impasto with bold lateral strokes, creating surfaces that pulse with the energy of oncoming waves. This was realism pushed to its dramatic frontier. Nature not as backdrop, but as a force confronting the viewer head-on. The compositions are structurally simple, but psychologically charged. A massive wave dominates the canvas, rising like a dark wall of water suspended in mid-crash. The horizon is often reduced to a thin, trembling line beneath a turbulent sky, amplifying the sense of containment and impending impact. Courbet's palette deep greens, slate blues, frothy whites, creates a tactile sense of cold and weight. Light glances sharply across the crest of the wave, illuminating both its beauty and its threat. These formal decisions transform the ocean into a living protagonist, echoing the painter's own internal storms. Interpreted symbolically, the wave becomes more than a study of nature. It is a vision of sublimity grounded in realism, a confrontation between human fragility and the overwhelming power of the natural world. The absence of figures intensifies this confrontation, leaving the viewer alone before the surge. In this solitude, the sea becomes a mirror of emotional turmoil, unpredictable, immense, and uncontainable. Courbet's realism thus acquires a metaphysical dimension, revealing how closely observation and introspection can intertwine. Across their various versions, the waves hold a singular place in Courbet's legacy. They anticipate later developments in modern landscape painting, from the expressive coastlines of the Impressionists to the abstractions of early 20th century seascapes. Their immediacy and volatility demonstrate the full force of Courbet's late style, proving that realism could be both viscerally physical and profoundly psychological. Today, these paintings remain some of the most powerful images of the sea in 19th century art, resonating with a timeless sense of awe and confrontation. Étretat had attracted numerous painters to its coasts from the early 19th century, having earned the reputation of having reviving air and a certain quality of light. During his time in the area in the summer of 1869, Courbet stayed in a house by the sea, which was sheltered against the cliff on the left of the bay. He would paint varying scenes of Falaise d'Aval many times during his sojourn in the Normandy town. The following canvas, the Étretat Cliffs After the Storm, is one of the artist's most notable paintings during this productive phase of his career. The locality is famous for its characteristic formations of natural archways, produced in the high rocks by centuries of water and wind. The canvas presents a view of the arched escarpment known as Porte d'Aval, replicated with broad and daring brushstrokes. Great attention has been paid to the intricate formation of the cliffs and rocks, giving the natural formation the appearance of a grand architectural structure. Arranged as a complex structure of vertical clusters of rock and mossy growth, it evokes the impression of an ancient ruin. Located today in Musée d'Orsay, the painting is a pure, uncomplicated landscape, with no sight of people, allowing our attention instead to focus upon the balance of land, rock, sea, and sky. It exudes a magisterial quality, conveyed through the transparent treatment of light, emanating from the sky, which is dominated by intricate cloud patterns. Courbet captures the bracing clarity of air, applying thinned and delicate color tones to represent the rejuvenated light following a storm. This attention to temporal effects communicates to us the cleaning power of nature. Courbet's close friend, the art critic Castagnari, who was a staunch advocate of realist art, lavished great praise on the canvas when it was first exhibited at the Salon of 1870. In particular, he admired the free, joyous air which circulates in the canvas and envelops the details. The painting won great acclaim at the exhibition and helped consolidate Courbet's reputation as one of the leading figures of art. In later years, the Impressionists revered Courbet's use of light and freedom, unprecedented for its time. Monet himself would visit the area and produce his own series of paintings, partly inspired by Courbet's work at Étretat. His reputation firmly established as an artist of wealth and fame, having recently produced some of his greatest work at Étretat, Courbet's career was nevertheless poised for a downward turn. Plagued by rheumatism and a worsening addiction to alcohol, he struggled to maintain his artistic output. Despite these personal challenges, he continued to make bold and defiant gestures. In June 1870, he was offered the Legion of Honor, the highest French order of merit for military and civil achievements, originally established by Napoleon Bonaparte in 1802. Courbet rejected the honor, asserting that art did not require the official approval of the state. This act exemplified his lifelong rebelliousness and refusal to conform to institutional authority, a stance consistent with his earlier confrontations with the French Academy over his provocative subject matter. The rejection of the Legion of Honor would ultimately contribute to his imprisonment and subsequent exile. During the 1860s, Courbet concentrated on erotic nudes, hunting scenes, landscapes, and seascapes. His treatment of the nude challenged contemporary norms and remains provocative to this day. The most notorious example, Origin of the World, 1866, depicts a woman's lower torso and open thighs, stripping away classical artifice and directing the viewer to confront the intimate realities of female anatomy. Such frank representation foreshadowed the raw eroticism of early 20th century painters, including Egon Schiele. Similarly, Courbet's late seascapes and landscapes, executed with thick tactile brushstrokes, emphasized the materiality of paint and the physical presence of water and terrain, anticipating innovations later explored by the Impressionists. These works demonstrate his capacity to subvert academic classicism while advancing a distinctly realist vision. The Franco-Prussian War of 1870-1871 precipitated the collapse of the Second Empire and the proclamation of the Third Republic. Amid the ensuing turmoil, the Paris Commune was established on the 18th March, 1871. Courbet, elected president of the Artists' Federation, assumed responsibility for reopening museums and organizing the annual Salon. Actively engaged in the Commune's revolutionary activities, he prioritized the protection of major public monuments, including the Sèvres porcelain factory and the palace at Fontainebleau, at a time when Paris was under sustained bombardment. Alarmed by the Commune's excesses, he resigned on 2 May 1871. The Commune voted to destroy the Place Vendôme column, a monument commemorating Napoleon Bonaparte's Grand Army, which was demolished on the 16th of May. 12 days later, with the Commune crushed by the army of Versailles, Courbet became a scapegoat for the act. Arrested on 7th of June, he faced a military court on charges of instigating the demolition despite having played no direct role. Sentenced to 6 months in prison and subjected to a substantial fine, Courbet was initially confined at Sainte-Pélagie prison before being transferred to a clinic due to illness. His incarceration, marked by harsh treatment and deprivation of painting materials, further exacerbated his declining health and alcoholism, which had progressed to liver disease. Upon release, Courbet returned to Ornans to recuperate, only to confront renewed persecution. In 1873, he was ordered to finance the reconstruction of the Place Vendôme column, amounting to 323,000 francs, payable in annual installments of 10,000 francs. Unable to comply, he defied the judgment and left France for Switzerland in July 1873, never to return. His personal property and artworks were seized, and he was additionally fined 500,000 gold francs. In exile, Courbet continued to paint, settling in Fleurier and devoting himself to still-life compositions of flowers and fruit. These works, characterized by meticulous attention to color, form, and texture, provided a means of aesthetic refuge from the political and personal turmoil he had endured. Notable among these is a large still life of fruits, measuring 63 x 73 centimeter, now held at the Norton Simon Foundation, Pasadena. A surviving letter from his sister Zoe in 1872 describes the painting as a large painting of a dozen pears, apples, heaped pleasantly on a table. Gustave is enchanted with it. He says that he never achieved such gracious effects of color. Through such compositions, Courbet explored the sensuality of natural forms, creating images of vitality and beauty in stark contrast to the hardships of his final years. Courbet never married, often citing his devotion to art as incompatible with domestic life. In 1872, he proposed to a young woman, promising in a letter that acceptance would make her envied across France. The proposal was refused, and he remained a lifelong bachelor. Later, he relocated to Vevey and then La Tour de Pales, acquiring an inn named Bonport, safe arrival, where he remained from 1874 until his death from liver disease, exacerbated by heavy drinking, in December 1877 at the age of 58. His remains were interred in the cemetery of Ornans. Courbet's legacy has continued to grow posthumously. He is celebrated as a pioneering exponent of realism and a central figure in the avant-garde, whose uncompromising commitment to depicting life truthfully reshaped modern art. His approach, often described as a democratic eye, revolutionized Western art by insisting on the depiction of ordinary people and natural forms with unflinching accuracy. Courbet's innovations paved the way for subsequent modern movements, including Impressionism and Post-Impressionism. Manet, Monet, Renoir, and others engaged directly with Courbet and were profoundly influenced by both his persona and his paintings. Moreover, Courbet's visceral application of paint and emphasis on materiality opened paths for figure and landscape painters of the 20th century, such as Willem de Kooning, Fairfield Porter, Lucian Freud, and the Bay Area figurative painters. His monumental canvases of everyday life, as well as his later still lifes, exemplify the enduring significance of his realist philosophy and his ability to reconcile technical mastery with a vivid representation of lived experience. Through these achievements, Courbet challenged prevailing artistic conventions, rejected romantic idealization, and established a legacy that continues to inspire successive generations of artists worldwide.